accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231. Adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Township of Franklin has been provided. Would you call the roll, please?
Raymond Betterbid.
Here.
Laura Grauman asked to be excused. Donald Johnson and Bruce McCracken all asked to be excused. Alan Rich.
Here.
Robert Shepard.
Here.
Anthony Caldwell.
Here.
Gary Rosenthal.
Here.
Joel Reese. Cheryl Bagallo.
Here.
And Robert Thomas.
Here. We have minutes of the regular meeting, March 1st, 2018. You have a copy, hard copy in front of you tonight. These are the minutes that were sent to everyone online. Unless there's an objection, I would be looking for a motion to approve.
That's the first problem.
I'll move it.
Need a second?
Second.
Alan Rich.
Yes.
Robert Shepard.
Yes.
Anthony Caldwell.
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal.
Yes.
Cheryl Bagallo.
Yes.
And Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Under the discussion section of the agenda, Franklin II Associates Limited appealing the appeal of a zoning decision. That's been carried to May 3rd, 2018, if anyone would be here for that. The first hearing, SRI Ramanuja Mission Incorporated, ZBA 17-00017, conditional use variance and site plan, which the applicant is proposing to construct a one-story temple and expand the parking lot, 619 Elizabeth Avenue, Somerset, block 508.02, lot 50.01 in the R40 zone. This has been continued or carried from March 15th, and there was no further notification needed, and whoever we have representing this organization.
Are all your mics on?
Mine is. Yeah, right. Bruce McCracken.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Peter Wagner, and I'm here as an of-counsel for Richard Lupo, LLC, representing the petitioner Sri Ramanuja Mission Incorporated. This application concerns a request for site plan approval and D3 conditional use variances to construct.
Can you speak louder?
Can you hold
Oh, sure. A little closer?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Sorry. This application concerns a request for site plan approval and D3 conditional use variances to construct a new one-story house of worship located at 619 Elizabeth Avenue, also known as Block 508.02, Lot 50.01 on the Franklin Township tax map. The property is zoned R40, which is a residential zone and consists of approximately 6 acres. Legal notices of this application were sent to all property owners within 200 feet of the subject property by certified mail on March 1st, 2018, and notice was published in the Home News Tribune on March 3rd, 2018. The petition was originally scheduled to be heard by the board on March 15th, 2018. However, the matter, along with the notice, was carried to today. A site plan was previously approved by the board for the property under docket ZBA 13-00006. The resolution of the board retained an existing building to be used as a priest quarters, as well as the conversion of an existing 2,000 square foot barn to 1,020 square feet of worship space and 980 square feet of priest space. There were 69 parking spaces and related modifications and improvements approved as well. Our current site plan proposes that a new structure of approximately 6,800 square feet be constructed toward the rear of the subject property, behind the residential priest quarters and the existing house of worship and the existing parking. The new building would house an additional 1,200 square feet of new worship area, with the remaining space dedicated to two priests, a new deity statue, and new facilities for the parishioners. If the plan is approved, the new house of worship would provide an inherently beneficial use for the community and adjacent residential development. Our current plan calls for a total of 149 parking spaces, 69 of which currently exist, 80 of which would be added as part of the plan. 49 of those 80 would be land banked. This would more than accommodate the new worship space, and our engineer will testify to that in a moment. Our application is a conditional use and is conforming in all respects except for the following D3 conditional use variances. First, we're seeking relief from section 11237E, requiring that the majority of parking be located behind the main building with no more than 10% being in front of the building. Second, relief from section 11237K1 and 2 regarding buffer requirements for one portion of the site plan. And finally, section 11237K3 regarding a small area on the original site plan, which showed 0.5 candles of light along one portion of the property line instead of the 0 allowed. I would note that the revised plans were submitted to the Township by the petitioner on or about September 15th of 2017, which show that the lighting requirement is now satisfied. We're confident.
So then you don't need the D3 variance for that?
That's correct. I'm actually going to have the engineer, Greg Ullman, testify to that in just a moment.
Okay.
Yes, thanks. We are confident that the testimony we present this evening will show that the benefits of granting any required variances connected with the site plan will substantially outweigh any detriment. We're also confident that the testimony will show that our site plan serves the public interest and has no substantial detrimental impact on the neighborhood or the community. I have 5 witnesses tonight, the first of which is Gregory Ullman, who is seated to my left. He's a licensed professional engineer, and he prepared the site plan.
Okay, now before you go any further, over here, I want you to back up just a little bit. You were talking about the new building, and you said that it's going to, what's it going to provide, the new building? You have worship space.
It is going to have worship space of 1,200 square feet.
And
it's going to have additional space for priests, as well as utility and service area.
what does that mean? Okay, all right.
Yeah, we're going to go through all of that with our witnesses this evening.
All right,
Absolutely.
good.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Ullman, how are you?
I need to swear him in.
Oh, absolutely, sorry.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Your name and address, please. Gregory Ullman. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Better. Okay. Mr. Ullman, if you could please provide the board with the benefit of your professional background and experience.
Sure. I am the president and owner of Menlo Engineering Associates, licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. Have been so approximately 16 years now.
You've been here before. We
It's been a
accept
little
his
while.
credentials so we can move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. And you prepared the site plan, Mr. Ullman?
Yes, I did.
Is that correct? And you're familiar with the site and the zoning ordinances?
Yes, I am.
Could you please explain the site conditions and the construction plan?
Sure. The first exhibit I have up here is actually the second page of the submitted engineering plan, so I don't know if you want me to mark that as A1 or not.
Why don't we mark it as A1 with
Okay.
today's date?
Will do. It is page 2 of the engineering document submitted with this application called Existing Conditions Plan. This particular application is for a 6.01 acre parcel identified by the township's tax map as block 508.02, lot 50.01. Again, falls within the R40 zone, single-family residential zone. House of worship is a conditional use within this particular zone. The site is bound by Elizabeth Avenue to the west, township-owned property to the south and to the east, single-family home to the north, additional single-family homes to the western side of Elizabeth Avenue, and the site's approximately 600 feet north of the signalized intersection of Elizabeth Avenue and Amwell Road. As explained by the applicant's attorney, this was a case that was in front of this board several years ago, was approved, constructed for a 2,000 square foot house of worship that had approximately 1,020 square feet of worship area, with the remaining area be utilized by the priests, bathrooms, common areas. We proposed 69 parking stalls. 27 of those were land banked, so 42 stalls were actually constructed. The land banked was approximately 40% of the requirement based on the house of worship requirements for the parking standards of the township. Parking stalls are 9 feet in width by 18 feet in depth with 26-foot drive aisles. In the northwest corner of the site was constructed an infiltration basin, which basically handled the 3 key components for stormwater management: rate of runoff from the site, water quality, and groundwater recharge. There was a dumpster located at the southeast corner of the existing building, which handles all the trash that was being generated on site. The single-family home that fronts along Elizabeth Avenue is being used by the priest, as testified at the previous application and currently today. What we are proposing, and I will mark this exhibit as A2, entitled Overall Plan Exhibit. Basically, the site plan overlaid on top of an aerial photo. We are looking to construct a 6,870 square foot temple to the east of the existing parking lot that was previously constructed. 1,200 square feet of that is going to be worship area, with the remaining 5,670 utilized by the priests, statue area, bathrooms, common areas. We do have a member of the temple that is here that was going to provide some testimony on how the operations, daily operations between this new building and the existing building work. But basically, everything occurs today within the small building. What they're looking at doing is expanding to have the new building where they can have prayers, have the actual worship done there. Common 2-3 people, family come in, spend some time there, walk over to the existing building, which is going to be only for meditation. It is no longer going to be utilized for worship. That is what the new building is going to be for. But you'll hear further testimony in a little bit from that member of the temple. We're proposing a total of 149 parking stalls, where 148 are required. We are showing 91 to be constructed total for the site, and land banking 58. Approximately, again, 40% of what the requirement is, as we did on the previous application, we're looking to land bank with this particular application. Parking stalls are going to be 9 feet in width by 18 feet in depth, with a circulation around all 4 sides of the building for emergency and fire, 26-foot drive aisles as required by the township. In terms of stormwater, we're going to maintain the existing infiltration basin. The infiltration area is large enough to provide the water quality and groundwater recharge for this additional impervious area to the east. But in terms of reducing the rate, turn it.
This way more. Like the way, kind of, well, right, you did, right.
No.
All right. Now, where were we?
In order to meet the rate of runoff leaving the site, because of the drainage size of the county drainage system within Elizabeth Avenue, we have to expand the basin towards the east strictly for volume. We're going to detain additional volume on site and allow it to leave slowly out to Elizabeth Avenue. Other utilities, including water, gas, electric, is all going to be fed on site from the previous use. It was stubbed out for the water, and it can easily be handled to the building. It was sized accordingly in case there was ever a future need. In terms of sewer, we're basically looking to do very similar to what we did on phase 1, was there is a septic field and tank that is located between the existing house and the place of worship. We are going to construct along the eastern parking lot a new septic field, completely independent. The flow, based on the calculations by the county health board, does not trigger a TWA requirement from the DEP. Therefore, the calculations have been submitted to the health department for review. In terms of lighting, we're going to extend LED lighting throughout the remaining portions of the site. Light fixtures are 155 watt, mounted at 14.5 feet tall, provides ample circulation and for pedestrians and vehicles safety-wise. There was a question regarding spillage at one of the property lines along the southern property line. The original application showed a 0.5 foot candle spillage along the property line, but the resubmission that our office made in September basically rotated, and I'll point it out, is one light fixture right down at the southwest corner of the new building, rotated it enough where we were able to meet the 0 foot candle at all property lines. Therefore, that is no longer a variance that is required for this application. The landscaping, we followed basically the same procedure that we did for the previous application. The requirement is a double row of evergreen plantings with shrubs and a 6 foot high board-on-board fence. On the previous application, we ran that buffer along the entire northern property line. But on the southern property line for the previous application, we didn't do a double row of evergreens because there was some significant vegetation there. And our office worked with Mr. Healy in coming up with a planting plan where we supplemented those areas and included a board-on-board fence. We're looking to do the same here. Along the northern property line, we're going to extend that double row of evergreen plantings to provide the buffer. On the southern side, because of the existing vegetation, we're supplementing in evergreen trees to basically fill in some of those holes. And on the eastern side, there's a significant existing vegetated buffer there that then buffers the township property to the east. We completely did not show a new buffer within that area because in our opinion, it didn't make sense to take down mature, existing, thick vegetation just to comply with this one condition. We certainly could, but again, as we did on the previous application, we felt it was better to leave the existing dense vegetation than to cut it down and install a double row of smaller trees to kind of just comply with that one stipulation.
Is board-on-board fence is going to be there, though?
We did not propose a board-on-board fence on the eastern side.
Okay.
In total, we are proposing 132 new trees, 194 shrubs, and 132 ground cover daylilies, fountain grasses, mostly the foundation plantings around the new building. In conclusion, we have 3 outside agency approvals that we are required that have jurisdiction over the property: Delaware Raritan Canal Commission, Somerset Union Soil Conservation, because we are disturbing over 5,000 square feet on site, and the Somerset County Planning Board.
I have a question now. What will be the capacity of the septic system?
The septic system is being designed based on a requirement that the fire official actually asked us to do. The parking requirement in town for a house of worship is 1 space per 15 square feet. That's something typically we use in our office when we're looking at a restaurant and trying to determine roughly how many people you're going to have, how many parking stalls. Typically 15 square feet per person is what is used.
Septic system.
Understood.
Oh.
Those calculations were submitted to the health department using 1 per 15 square feet to determine the capacity and what the capacity of the building could be. The fire official came back and asked us to run that number at 1 per 7 square feet. It was extremely tight. If you're standing there, you have literally 2 by a little over 3.5 or so around you. That's very tight. But that calculation was performed by the engineer and submitted to the health department. Again, still does not trigger a TWA, and the field is sized accordingly.
So now, I'm
How
sorry, Bob.
many people can it support? That lends to a restriction of how many people might be present on site at any given time.
If you want, I can get my calculator. I can tell you what. The design was not finalized, but it was submitted for preliminary review to the health department. About 172 people.
That's,
Based on,
so is the testimony going to be later that there won't be more than 172 people on site at a given time?
Most likely, yes, that's exactly true.
Yeah, but I mean, most likely.
Well, not most likely, actually. I'm going to be asking member of the temple about all of those things. It's always under 170, and in fact, it's significantly less than that. It's actually more like 50 people at any given time. and I'll present testimony about that. Okay. Did you have the opportunity to review Thomas Zelnick's letter for the Zoning Board of Adjustment dated November 28th, 2017?
Yes, I did.
All right. Then I'm just going to ask you a couple questions about that. On item 8, could you just provide clarification on how solid waste trash is intended to be collected?
Yeah, sure. Right now, there is a public hauler that collects trash at the southeast corner of the existing building. At first, it was looked at by the tenant that that would be enough to be able to utilize for the existing building and the new building, but we looked at it and felt it was kind of a distance to bring garbage from the new location to this. So what we're going to end up proposing at the southeast corner of the development, just to the east of these 15 land bank stalls, is a new dumpster location. Very similar to that, again, completely controlled by a private company, hours of operation, how many times a week it gets picked up, et cetera, just like it is today.
All right, and for item 9, a note on the plans should be provided indicating an as-built plan prepared by a licensed land surveyor to be submitted to the township. Has that been?
We can comply with that. We can
All
comply
right.
with all other comments within this letter.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another quick question, not related to that. So is there a master plan, so to speak, for the future use of this facility? The reason I ask is it's only been a couple of years. Was an approval for a fairly small facility and a small congregation, and now we're back hearing one that's more than double. And it'd be nice to know if we're looking at this site plan in terms of what might be coming in the future. For instance, after the other approval was already a water sub installed for another facility, which wasn't mentioned at the hearing at that point in time. So are there any other things we should be aware of to think about in terms of possibly incorporating into a site plan?
My next witness is going to address all of those points, and you'll have an opportunity to ask him questions about the future of the site.
Is he finished?
But he's not done answering questions. Can you get up and show me where the board-on-board fence is going to be and where it's not going to be?
The board-on-board fence is existing up to where the improvements ended for the previous application. The plans right now do not show a board-on-board fence on either side, but based on recommendations from Mr. Healy, he strongly suggested that we add that, and we will certainly do that, including some additional plantings in here where we'll work with him, where he feels we could increase that buffer even further. So the board-on-board fence is going to basically continue along the northern and southern property lines to the rear of what is being disturbed.
Okay, and then I'm having trouble with north, south, and that's east. That little short wall is east?
This is, correct.
Yes, and there's not going to be any board-on-board there.
No board-on-board because of the existing vegetation.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Is that the kind of vegetation that kind of disappears in the wintertime when all the leaves fall off?
No, actually it doesn't. That is pretty dense back there. And that property leads all the way out to Amwell Road where Cedar Grove and Amwell come together. That farm field, that is all township-owned property.
Okay, if there's no further board questions.
One question, Mr. Chairman. Was there going to be testimony about the lighting? Wasn't the light going to be, the variance eliminated?
No, I testified to it, but I'll
Okay.
go at it again. The original submission showed there was a slight glare onto the property line of approximately 0.5 foot candles. Our September submission, the revised plan, showed at the southwest corner of the building, there was one fixture that we rotated probably about 15 to 20 degrees, which we were able to completely eliminate any spillage at the property line.
So you're not seeking that variance?
Nope.
All right, thank you.
Okay, then, is there any member of the public that would like to ask this witness a question concerning his testimony? Remember, we're limited now to questions about his testimony. This is not an opinion or a statement or whatever. So if you have a question for this witness?
You have to come up, sir. And
Don't
please,
use the mic in the phone.
there's a microphone over there.
Just give us your name and your,
Supporter, yeah.
Mike Amberger, I live at 600 Elizabeth Avenue, and it was stated that this would be a benefit to the
speak
local.
into,
Mike Amberger, 600 Elizabeth Avenue. It was stated that this would be a benefit for the local residences, and I would like to see what supports that opinion.
okay, that's not his testimony. That will be later.
But-
His is engineering and,
But didn't the attorney say that his
He
opinion?
did, but it doesn't really matter what he says. He's just kind of letting us know what his witnesses are gonna say later. There'll be a planner that will come up and say that, and then you can ask him that
Oh,
question.
I thought the attorney said he would support his idea that it would benefit the local.
Well, he will, but with a witness.
Okay.
any other questions? Yes.
My name is Doug Denbick. I live at 2027
Get
Amarillo.
up close, please.
Just trying to figure out, you mentioned the septic, that it handles 172 people. Why are there 149 parking spots if there's only 50 people that go to the house to worship at one time? What are the proposed parking spots needed for if only 50 people go to worship?
On the original application, the applicant and the township went back and forth on what was an appropriate number of stalls to construct. We certainly felt that a lot less could be constructed, but we'd be asking for a variance. So we came to that conclusion that approximately 40% of the requirement should be land banked. And when they're land banked, if there's ever a need in the future that the town sees or the applicant sees, they are then required to basically construct those land bank parking stalls.
But if there's only 50 people at a time for worship, what is the reason for such a big building? If the existing building is going to be for praying, the proposed buildings would be for worship. I don't understand why you need such a big building for the number of people that you're
My
describing.
We will need to
our
ask
next
that
witness is
later.
actually going to address that, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're having no board-on-board fence on the eastern portion of the property because you say the vegetation is thick enough, that the existing vegetation is thick enough. From my property, I can see the grass, the cleared area, and the refurbished barn right now. The building you're proposing is coming past that towards my property even more. So you mentioned that the existing vegetation doesn't lose any of its leaves or anything coverage for the winter months. It does, because I can see the building right now from my property.
Along your rear property.
Correct.
Correct.
Well, you're saying that, I'm just
The
worried
question
because,
was about the eastern area, whether that is going to create a buffer along the eastern towards
right,
Cedar
the
Grove.
eastern portion, like I said, I can see from my property, when this building goes in, it's going to be well past the existing barn that's there.
Sir,
And-
if I could ask you a question.
Sure.
Your property is to the east of this
Yes, it
property?
is.
You don't immediately abut the site? So that,
Right at the corner of the
at the corner?
property.
So the engineer testified that they are going to provide the board-on-board fence along that southerly property line.
The
Are you
southern
saying-
property, but then the
let
eastern
me-
portion, like I said, because of
gonna
the
be my
tree
question.
line
Is
that's
that-
there.
is-
Right.
Is that, my question is, if they put that fence along the southerly property line, are you saying that that's not going to help you?
No, it's not.
Like,
No,
you
it's
should
not.
explain to the board why, so they understand.
Oh, well, like I said, because of the positioning of the property and where my property comes to the corner, the southeast corner of the property, the building, from what I saw on the plans, the entrance to the new building will be on the eastern side of the building. And I'm just curious that the majority of the lighting will be there, cars will be coming around there, people will be going into that end of the building, which is facing basically my property that is adjacent to that corner. I'm just proposing, why can't a fence line be put in there as well?
What we could do is we could continue that fence around where we're clearing that along the eastern side to the eastern side of the septic field and continue that around to the northern. We could do that. We could, basically enclosing the entire developed, cleared area within that fence. We could do that.
Okay?
That's your backyard? That's
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The only question I have is, on the plans you have Phase 2, is there going to be a Phase 3, Phase 4? What are the proposals for anything further after this?
That was
I think
my
the chairman
question. They're going to.
Okay.
Again, our
That'll be
next.
brought up later?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
And we have one more, sir, I think.
My name is Mark Chambers. I currently.
Close to the mic.
Hello. My name is Mark Chambers. I'm currently a renter with days away from closing on the property that is actually adjacent. It's on Amwell Road, adjacent to where the worship area is going to be. And I can tell you a couple of things, having lived there a few years, and I'm concerned about them. One is the lights have increased, especially over the last couple of months. They've gotten much brighter. There's actually one there now that.
Remember, we're looking for questions on,
Well, I'm going to get to the question. And basically, the question is going to be, are you going to do something to minimize the lighting at night? Because currently it's bright, shines into our rooms. Second question is, in terms of the fence, a fence doesn't do much on the east side of the property. Currently, in the summer and the winter, we can see the full property, even though you've got a fence there. Is it going to be an extremely high fence? What's
6 foot high.
Okay, so that's not going to do much more than what is done now. Right now and during the winter, I have a very treed backyard. You can see everything. It's not dense at all, even though it's got easily 100 oak trees and pine trees on it. You see right through it. I can see everything from the open green space. So I guess my question or concern is that.
Sir, would you mind identifying on the map exactly where you're referring to?
Correct, correct.
Sir, excuse me, the recording secretary needs to be able to hear you, so you have to speak into the mic. So if you want to take it,
Pull the mic down, take it with you.
yeah, you can take it with you. I was just letting you know.
I was just going to say when I'm sitting on my deck, which is a ground level deck, I can still see very easily over that 6-foot fence, and that's also why the light coming from, I suppose it's this parking lot up front, shines over all the way to our house. And then I guess you also installed new lights on the building itself, because when it's lit up at night, it's also much brighter than it was 2 months ago. So my question is there going to be something done to reduce the lighting in the evening and nighttime?
My response would be, this is the first that I've heard of additional lighting being added recently, since the construction was done. Perhaps I could ask Mr. Healy, maybe something where we could do some timers for the site lighting, that after a certain time they go off, for at least a couple dim for safety reasons, but for the most part, we can turn a lot of them off.
Well, I mean, that's something you would need to propose. We have had other applications where, based on their operations, they've had different areas, in different sectors. You know, if it's going to be a Monday night, Tuesday night, and there's only going to be a few people, you don't light up the whole parking lot. You have maybe one area in the back where just a few lights turn on. Then only during when you have larger events and you actually need the entire parking lot lit up, then the whole thing. But that's something you would need to talk about with your client, find out what kind of lighting you need. But that is something that the board has asked for and other people have done.
Would LED lighting help?
We are proposing LED.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that? Are you planning on evening events?
that's not his
Okay.
area. We'll get to
I
that.
guess then the only other question, what was it? Oh, it being one story, is there going to be domes or anything that exceeds the 1 story?
We have an architect that's going to be providing testimony that will
Okay.
talk about the look of the building, the elevations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll close to the public for the moment. Next witness.
I just have a quick question. Over here.
Yes.
In the land bank parking areas, the curbing, are you relying on that for stormwater purposes, or can that be removed?
Our stormwater calculations anticipated everything getting constructed at one day, so it's been sized accordingly, if that's,
Yeah,
Am
okay,
I-
thank
yes.
you.
Anything else? Okay, next.
I'd like to call Shyam Srinivasan, please. He's a representative of Sri Ramanuja Mission.
Could you raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you shall give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Could I state and spell your last name, please?
Yeah, my name is Shyam Srinivasan, spelled Sreenivassan, and my address is 14 Renfield Drive, Princeton, New Jersey, 08540.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Srinivasan, what is your position with Sri Ramanuja Mission Incorporated?
I'm an executive director and a member of the board of trustees for Sri Ramanuja Mission
And how long have you been there?
from 2000 onwards.
So you are familiar with the site at 619 Elizabeth Avenue?
Yes, I did. I in fact presented for the first approval 5 years back.
All right. Are you familiar with the current site plan application we're presenting?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with the day-to-day operations of the current house of worship?
Yes, I'm very familiar with it.
How long has the current house of worship or temple been operating?
Since 2015, just to give a backdrop, 2013 May is when we got the approval, so it took 2 years for us to actually construct it and make it as a place of worship. So we didn't really operate that as a place of worship for the first 2 years after we got the approval.
Okay. What is your average attendance right now?
So it depends on weekdays versus weekends. Weekdays it's pretty much nothing. I would say on an average we have about 10 or 15 people that come through the entire day, course of the day. Weekends we have a floating population anywhere between 60 to 80 people that come through the day. It's not at any one point in time, but that's the kind of number that we have.
All right. So the temple does not have set times for services other than the hours of operation that you run, is that
There's
correct?
no, other than the hours of operation, people can come anytime, they can go anytime, yeah.
Has the number of worshipers changed at all since you opened the temple?
No, we are a very small congregation. We are not in the growth phase or anything like that. So this congregation is about preserving and protecting the age-old traditions. So the size of our congregation is not expected to grow, and it's not grown in the last 5 years.
All right. So you anticipate that there would be only a few new worshipers were the site plan to be approved. Is that correct in the new temple?
No, we don't know whether there would be any new worshipers. That's not the reason why we are asking for this approval. So maybe there will be new worshipers, or maybe it's the same, or maybe it would reduce. We don't know. But that's not the reason why we are going for this plan.
Okay. Yeah. Could you explain that a little bit? Why wouldn't you grow if you have a larger place?
Yeah, so this,
We're really not that interested in that. We want to know what his plan is.
Yes.
We want to know why he's doing this.
yes, okay,
Okay.
I can get to that. So the current structure is from an existing barn that we constructed as a place of worship.
You know what we're going to do is actually, if we could mark this floor plan as A3.
I will.
And I'm going to have Mr. Srinivasan go up to it.
It's already there. A3.
It's already there, A3. Okay, great.
Okay, so there are problems with the existing structure. Even though it's a small congregation, people have to leave their footwears outside. There's no covered place for them to remove the footwears. Particularly during the winter time, it becomes very difficult for the worshipers to leave it. It's cold on a snow day, it's snowy, it's wet. When they go back, the footwear is really soggy and messy. So that's problem number one. Before they enter the temple area, there's a small transition area. There's no coat hanger or any place where they can leave their jackets and bags and whatnot. So typically what the worshipers do is come into the worship area and spread their coats and jackets before they go into worship. So it actually clutters the whole place. And it's not a good scene in a worship area which has got a divine sanctity and whatnot. So it's just that the place is not suitable because we just don't have any space. That's problem number two. Problem number 3, the men's stall, there's only one toilet stall and 2 urinals there. On the women's side, there's 2 stalls. And even though we don't have a big congregation, when there are people, about 30 or 40 people, when they all leave, they all want to use the restroom. And there's a line, and there's no place to stand there because it's such a small 6 feet by 2 feet before they enter, and that's the only corridor that they have. So that becomes a big problem. So we just don't have any space for service area before they come into worship. So if you look at the plan that we present here, the blue color, it's the exact same size as what the worship area plan in the current building. So the worship area doesn't change. All the deities would move from the current area to the new area.
All the what, I'm sorry, all the what?
All the deities, the statues, the idols that people worship on, everything gets moved from the current to the new place. The current place becomes a place for peaceful meditation, which is also part and parcel of our worship. Our rituals has 2 parts. One is pray to the God with the help of the priest, and then go in solitude and meditate. And that meditation, we just don't have any space now. Because this space becomes available, we can actually offer full services as per our traditions, where they go to the temple, worship to the God with the help of the priest, come back and have a peaceful meditating place where they meditate for as long as they want, typically about 10-15 minutes, and then they go back home. That's basically, I can walk through the plan.
No, that's,
Yes, why don't you walk, if you could,
that was a good explanation.
I'd like you to take us through a typical visit for a parishioner in the new.
Okay. So this is the proposed new building. So the building here is Elizabeth Avenue is here. So this is facing east. So in our tradition, the deity is here, facing east. That's the kind of direction that the deities need to face. We have to face the deities on the west. So the deity is like a statue. If I was a deity, I'm facing east here, and this is that building here. So the worshippers come through the entrance from the west, and as they pass through, the very first section is going to be the bigger enhanced service area, which is the problem right now that we are trying to address. It will have men's and women's stalls here, facility here, enough stalls so that we don't have a problem there. So as they come, they have a closet where they can keep their belongings. And then I'll come to this area. They have coats and shoes where they can hang their jackets and whatnot, and the shoes they can leave before they actually enter into the worship area. So these 2 areas are going to be restricted, still service, but one part of it is going to be used for the priest to prepare the ceremonial food offerings to God. And that's part and parcel of our service. Today we don't do it because we just don't have the facility for that too. So that's something that we can enhance from a religious offering point of view, that what we offer as dry fruits like cashew nuts and almonds, we actually have to prepare a cooked food. You know, we have some samples of what that food is. If anyone is interested, we can actually show what it is. It's a very simple vegetarian rice pudding. So as simple as that. So that is going to be prepared only by the priest, only for offering to God 2 times a day, one in the morning, one in the evening. Regardless of whether any worshippers come, weekdays I mentioned, no one comes. In spite of that, the daily rituals require that the food needs to be offered to God first, and that the priest is going to do that, and that's why it's coded red here. And the other area is just to distribute what the offered food is, like what that gentleman is giving, in a styrofoam cup. It's not a meal of any sort. It's not going to substitute for a breakfast or lunch or dinner. It's just a ceremonial offering that was given to God, is being shared with all the devotees, like that one that's being distributed. It's exactly like, so we have 3 different types of it, all rice with milk or with yogurt, with sugar or with salt, depending on the time of the day.
You have no kitchen, right?
Today we don't have kitchen, and that's the reason why we cannot offer that in today's services. Today we just give almonds and cashew nuts as a substitute. It's less than what we need to do for a deity, but because of restrictions, we just have to live with that. Now, we are proposing to have a small kitchen, which is going to be used only by priests, only for offering it to God. So that's the service area part of it. And then they come through a small corridor So it's not going to be used as any holding area. All they can do is come into the building, in the worship area. So there is going to be a flagpole which marks the entrance of the worship area.
Thank you.
And then they have the 1,200 square feet, like 30 by 40 buffer area, which is the place where it's exactly a replica of what we have today, that they come, see the deity in front of them. The area in red is marked red because no one has access to that area other than the priest. So the priests go in there, offer the customized service. Typically they ask for the birth star, the lunar calendar, and the names of the people who are there, so they actually do some prayers on behalf of the devotees. And then it's about 10 minutes in total. At the back of the room, we have some storage area for storing the vessels and the ornaments and the jewelries that we use to adorn the god. And we also have storage area, like a walk-in refrigerator plan, for the flowers that need to be used for these prayers. So that's the worship area, and that's the service area, separated by a small corridor. That's basically the plan that we have.
So the kitchen isn't going to have any kind of cooking, that you're saying?
We have to cook rice with heating of the milk and put brown sugar in that. I mean, that's one version of it, but it's not a full-fledged kitchen in a sense of kitchen. It definitely needs a stove top, but it's for preparing exactly what you have here, is mixing of cooked rice with milk and with sugar or salt, depending on what it's being prepared. It's a very simple ceremonial offering that we give to God and then consume that as God's grace, a blessing to us. And that's our tradition.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question? So if you can just to clarify, explain again, the area, the worship area, that there's a blue area and there's a red area. Can you just explain again, what is the area where people would be worshiping? And then I think there's an area to the red to the left of that. Can you just explain again what that area to the red is and how access would be
These are just
limited?
marking. So if you just focus on the rectangle here, that's the only area that we have. And the blue is the place where the worshippers come and stand there in front of the deity and for about 10 minutes or so. They don't have access to the red area. We have a sliding door or whatever that we'd say no admission beyond this point, and that's only accessible by the two priests that we have in this temple.
So
even us as member of board of directors, we don't have access to it because it's a sanctified area that we typically don't go in other than the priests going in there. It's like an altar of a church.
And that is a statue room in the center, is that right?
That's right.
And it is surrounded by space around there for the priest, is that correct?
That's right. There's a room here, the statue room, and there's a space around it, which is used by the priest to go get the flowers and get the vessels and prepare themselves for the daily prayers. And that's the style. It's not that we want to keep the space vacant, but that's the typical style of a temple, is give a lot of attention to the center room where the deity is, leave a lot of space around it so that all the focus goes on the deities, and don't clutter with too many things around it.
Okay, so then the total area on the site then that's going to be available for worship would be, that area is 1,200 square feet, correct? And then the existing building is it 1,020?
1,020, yeah.
Okay, so just to clarify, because there was a question in my report, you've clarified it. So that would be, on your plans, you've calculated a parking requirement of 148, at least per our requirement. You have to have one space for every 15 square feet of worship area. You've clarified that, so your parking requirements were correct.
Right.
Thank you. All right, so after the parishioners are done worshiping, they head back out to the service area, is that correct?
So as they finish worshiping, if they happen to be around the time that the food was offered to God, because it's very limited food, it's not going to be there through the day. If they happen to be there at 10:30 a.m. or 7:30 p.m., they get to share the food that was offered. As they walk by, they pick one of them with the help of the priest or the volunteers and take it back with them It's not a congregation. There's no sit-in dining area or anything like that. It's just going to be a place where they collect it as the blessing grace of the God and then go. And what we're proposing is, as we told before, we have this other space that we want to use it as a meditation area because it completes the service. It completes the rituals as per traditions. So we want to use that as a quiet meditation area. There won't be any deity there. Maybe there will be a statue which is not really, just to get the focus on, but no worship or religious service will be offered in the current structure. Everything moves here. And it's just a hall where it's going to be quiet. People go there, meditate for 10, 15 minutes, and then go back home.
Right. And you're not proposing any changes at all to the meditation space that it already exists?
That no change whatsoever. It won't have any additions, add-on, no kitchen, no rental, no nothing. So it's just going to be what it is today.
Mr. Chairman, the exhibit that's presented there is slightly different than the plans that were submitted, for the packet. In that little blue corridor, that was a larger area. That was kind of the genesis of my question about the parking. So that was kind of a larger area. So my question was basically, well, that could be used for worship. They've now changed the plans to make that just a narrow corridor.
This one was reduced. Previously, it was the walls were along this side. The walls are cut down now. It's just going to be a smaller area that separates the worship and service area.
So with my point being, if the board is inclined to approve the application, the submittal will have to be modified to be consistent with their exhibit.
That's fine, correct. And that's all right with you.
Yes.
So the questions I was asking you before about the meditation area and the versus being used versus the worship area that is now in there, I just want to ask the chairman if we've answered his question regarding the difference between the two, the worship and the meditation. Oh, thank you, and with the capacity. All right, I don't have any further questions. I can open it up to questions from the board.
Anything for the board?
Just clarification, there's only 2 priests?
Currently, yes, there's only 2 priests, yeah. And we have no plans to increase that.
What about special events?
We have 3 special events. One on New Year's Day, Jan 1, everyone comes there for praying to God. One we have around Memorial Day because that's when in May 2015 the temple's inaugurated, so it's a very special day for us. And then one around Christmas time because it follows a lunar calendar. It's between December 25 and Jan 1. So it could be the Jan 1. That doesn't mean we have double the number of people. So it's the same kind group of people that come. Let's say it was on December 28th, so they come on December 28th and Jan 1. And the other event that we mentioned is the Memorial Day Sunday of the Memorial Day. So in the last couple of years, 3 years that we have operated, for the Memorial Day event, we have gotten township permission for putting a tent up and perform the events outside because it's a nice summer time and people like to spend outside rather than inside. So that is something that we would continue. We would probably take the deities out and do the rituals there outside in the field rather than doing it inside. But the December event and the Jan 1 would be inside.
So at this point, you're looking at one outdoor event.
And with township permission whenever we do it, yeah.
Other questions?
Now, 5 years ago, it's starting to come back a little bit. I think there was some issues about parking. They were parking out on a street. I think there were citations. Were there citations back then?
No, we don't have any site. Any event that we've had, we have a police that we engage, and they come and help us. They stand there through the day, and we pay the township for that, the police department for that. So every single year, we have complied with all the norms, and we've never had any citations of any sort for that reason.
Yeah, I think that's a different site
Okay.
that we had a hearing on a few months ago. I think it was that application.
Any other questions? Open to the public then. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask this witness questions based on the testimony that you heard. Come on up.
I should say this is my first time at a township meeting.
Sir,
so-
Can you just give us your name again, please?
Mark Chambers.
Thank you.
Can you spell your name and your address for the recording secretary, please?
MarkChambers, 2045 Amwell Road. I think this is the right time to ask this question. Do you have evening events?
Do you have, sorry?
Evening events.
What do you mean by evening events?
Events that take
Inside the
place in the
temple.
evening.
Inside the temple until the temple closes,
And what time is that?
between 8 and 8:30.
Okay, so will the lights go off after that?
It goes off. I was surprised when you said that it doesn't, but we have sensors on the lights, so as people leave, we are typically not there beyond 8:30. And I've had issues going back to my parking, to the car and parking, because the entire place is dark beyond a certain point in time. So I was surprised when you said that.
You actually have one light that stays on all night, that flashes on and off all night.
We can definitely look into that, but we would comply with whatever the township says it should be.
Okay.
But any events is going to be indoor and not outdoor beyond that particular time.
Okay. And on the Memorial Day event, you tend to have more people than 40, or last year it was, I'd say, maybe 80 along.
Yeah, we double that actually. We say that on an event, one of the 3 events, we would have about 150 people, and we've not had 150 people sadly, but that's fine. 150 is what we project it to be, and we rented the parking out of the school. Even though we had enough parking, we rented the parking out of the school for devotees who come on those days, and these are only 3 days in a year.
Is that 150 for the weekend? Or
For the entire
for the entire thing?
weekend, yeah.
So that's spread over that amount of time,
It's
correct?
spread over, let's say it was a Memorial Day Sunday, 150 people is what the entire day event would have. At any point in time, at the max would be about 50 people. Because it's a floating population. We don't have a certain service times. People come and go, but around the peak time, about 10:30 in the morning, you would see about 50 people. In the evening, if it was an evening occasion, you would see about 50 people or so, right? So.
Okay, let me just say that as a nearby resident, I've had no problems with your
Thank you.
existing structure or your events. But my concern is obviously your proposals.
We are not expanding our congregation or our devotees base. That's not this plan, because even if we wanted to, this practice of Hindu faith is about traditions and maintaining it without diluting it. A lot of temples here become very commercial and diluted. That's not the whole plan, and our goal is not to build a huge, massive temple structure. It is just enough for the kind of congregation that we expect. And we don't expect even one additional member with this plan. That's not the reason why we are doing this.
Thank you.
Okay, and then before we excuse him, I would think, looking back to the last approval, with the exception of the kitchen facility, there would probably be no problem keeping the same conditions.
I will go through those conditions.
please.
and
So no
confirm that.
weddings, funerals.
Yes,
That's correct.
that's correct. That part of it is correct.
Don't rent the home or worship house that's
We
only
won't plan,
used for
we don't plan to do,
residence.
yeah. Yep, we,
Statues not displayed outside,
yes, we comply to that.
no outdoor speakers,
We comply for that.
and then the hours of operation, 8 a.m. to 11 Monday through Friday morning, and 4 to 8 in the evening, weekends 8 to 8.
Yes, we comply for that.
Okay, then we can move on.
Plus or minus, winter times it's difficult to be at 8 o'clock, so as long as there's a tolerance of like 30 minutes shift here and there, the devotees know, they don't come exactly at 8 o'clock to open the door, but as long as there is some variance of that, between 8 and 8:30 is what we would prefer.
For opening.
Opening, yeah.
I would think that would be much, much less of any issue than if they were coming after the closing.
Yeah, 8 o'clock.
You know, that's something, I don't know how, you know, who's going to be able to regulate, micromanage that part of it. It's, I would think the closing is important, though, because I would also think eventually tonight, someone will probably say that's when the lights should be out, or within the X number of minutes after that.
We'll comply with what the township states. Even if it's 8 p.m., we'll go with that.
But if you're closed at 8 p.m. and you have people in there, you're not going to turn the lights out on them.
No, our services
Well, you
end
want
at a
to do
particular
that.
point.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
I
I think it's a
Mr.
matter of
Healy
practicality.
suggested is being able, knowing your method of operation, using certain parts of the parking lot,
Yeah,
when
this,
you lit on certain nights, that for your own benefit. And
right. This particular part, we don't have a choice of shutting down at 8 p.m. because there are certain rituals to be completed. The entire place, the deity place is closed. It's a matter of pushing people out and say the temple is closed. And if it's 8 p.m., we'll do that. We'll comply.
All right, next witness.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else?
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, I like to call Jay Troutman. He is our traffic expert.
You swear the testimony you shall give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Spell your last name, please.
J. Troutman, Troutman, McDonough and Ray Associates, 105 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Mr. Troutman, could you please provide the board with the benefit of your professional background and experience?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My field of specialty is traffic engineering. I've been conducting traffic studies for about 30 years now.
Okay, we're good with that. Let's move on.
All right.
You might need to be a little closer to the mic.
And you're familiar with the site? Is that
Yes.
correct? And you did a study at this site, is that correct?
Yes, we've now done 2 traffic studies. We did the initial traffic study in late 2012 for the initial approval, and then we were able to do a follow-up study that was submitted with the application and reviewed by your professionals.
And you authored that study, the one that we're, for this particular application, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And could you provide the board with a summary of your report and its conclusions with regard to that particular study?
Yes. The prior study predicted that there would be no traffic impact or issues resulting from the proposed use, and that was purely based on the statement of operations that the applicant had given. That has turned out to be the case. We were able to go out and confirm, now that the temple's been built, to confirm that it operates as previously stated, with sort of a very staggered attendance throughout the day. The busiest days, as stated by the trustee that testified before me, is on a weekend. The weekdays, there's very little activity to speak of. So we chose a weekend to go out and visit the parking lot and observe the activity, and it was exactly as stated. There are about 60 to 80 people a day throughout a weekend day, and for the 1 hour that we were there, we observed about 8 of those people. So that if you're open for 12 hours, it works out to the numbers that have been testified to, and of course, it's a very low impact. There's typically 3 or 4 devotees per car, and it's staggered throughout the day. It has no impact on conditions at the driveway on Elizabeth or any off-site intersections, and we find that this application as described, which really won't change anything significantly in terms of traffic, will continue to function as a very low traffic generator with little or no impact.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. In theory, from the testimony I've just heard, you should be giving us basically the same traffic report that you did 3 or 4 years ago.
Yes,
Because
except
they're
that,
not adding people, they're not
Right.
adding parishioners, they're not increasing the use. They're accommodating a space issue for the existing congregation.
that's exactly right.
Any board questions? Okay, any public? And this again is limited to traffic.
Yes, good evening. My name is Michael
Need to
D'Alessandro.
get up close to the mic, please.
Good evening. My name is Michael D'Alessandro.
Closer. Now it has to be closer to the microphone.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry. Good evening. My name is Michael D'Alessandro, and
You have to
I own
spell,
the
your-
property.
sir, you have to spell your name, please, and give your property address.
Michael, Michael, D'Alessandro, D'Alessandro. I feel like I'm drinking this thing. 612 Elizabeth Avenue, Somerset, New Jersey. I own the property with my brothers directly across the street from the temple. So my question to the engineer is, regarding parking, where will the parking be, where will the parking area be for the construction of the new temple?
The proposed parking area,
Yes.
that's shown on the first exhibit that was presented. So the existing parking area will be expanded to the east around the new proposed building.
Okay, and is there adequate parking for the number of people that will attend the event or events at the temple?
Yes.
Please describe the parking and when you say yes, what do you mean by yes?
Well, the prior witness just described that during the Memorial Day event, there would be 80 people throughout the day, with a maximum of 50 people on the site at one time. And the site is going to have 91 parking spaces.
And how many people do you anticipate will be at one event? Will it be more than 90 people, 180 people, 500 people? How many people would be at one given event?
Now, I just stated that during the entire day of their Memorial Day event, it's a total of 80 people for the whole day.
So is my understanding in Franklin Township that you need one parking space rather, for every 3 people that attend an event? Is that what we have here?
Yes, and that's a typical standard.
So then why are they seeking a variance for parking? My understanding, there was inadequate parking.
The variance, sir, actually has to do with the location of the parking relative to the building, and not the actual number of parking spaces.
Okay,
The
so
number of parking spaces are compliant with
Okay,
the
so
code.
the actual parking lot will be located where?
It's located between the two buildings. If you look at A2 that's up there right now,
Okay, so you don't
Yeah.
believe that this will have any impact on the traffic on Elizabeth Avenue?
It will not. That's correct.
Are you familiar with St. Thomas Church down the street on Elizabeth Avenue?
No.
Because they built the church, they didn't have adequate parking, and then people start parking on Elizabeth Avenue, which is illegal when they attend mass or a congregation. So my concern was that happening here, but you suspect that's not going to happen here?
This is not a church. This is a temple. It's nothing like that church.
I understand that it's a temple and not a church, but the temple has events and people come to the event, correct?
It's nothing like a church where you have a service that starts at a certain time, where you have a certain seating capacity. This use has, like I said, a total of 80 people throughout an entire 12-hour day.
Okay.
The day I was there, in an hour, they had 3 families come in with 3 or 4 people per car.
Okay.
It's throughout the day. It's a totally, you can't even think about it as a church. It's a totally different animal if you listen to the testimony from the trustee.
I understand. So you're not concerned at all that people may park on the side of Elizabeth Avenue if there isn't a place for them to park when they go to the temple to worship?
No,
You
not
don't have
concerned
that
at all. That won't happen.
Okay, thank you. That was my
Mike,
only question.
Mike, I have a question for you. Can you show me where you live? You said across the street. Are you talking about across Elizabeth Avenue?
Directly across the street from the temple on Elizabeth Avenue, yes.
I think it's over in this area, like.
Second house from the corner of Amwell Road and Elizabeth Avenue.
Where is your driveway compared to theirs?
Directly across the street.
Pointed out on the,
So the driveways meet?
Sir, I believe you're lot 8. I believe his driveway is over in this area off the corner here. Yes.
Just one more comment on the parking. If you had heard the term land banking, what that means is that they have, per our ordinance, and based on the square footage, they have a requirement to provide 148 spaces. Based on the anticipated actual parking needs, they're proposing to actually construct 91 of those spaces based on, again, the testimony that's been provided, the number of people there that they anticipate. They're going to land bank 58 spaces. And what that means is it's already on the plan. They've shown where the curb lines could go, where those additional spaces would be constructed if there's a need. So if this does get built, and if people are parking on the grass, people are parking, I don't think they're going to park on Amwell because they have enough space on here to park on but if that was to happen, then the town can make them construct that additional 58 spaces. We have room to work with, I guess, is that we have wiggle room here in case a problem does ever happen, in the form of 58 additional spaces.
Yes, that was my concern. And why I mentioned St. Thomas Church, I understand the church is not a temple, but by way of a metaphor, they built a church. Sometimes they'll get 10 people, sometimes they'll get 100 people, and people start parking on Elizabeth Avenue on the emergency shoulder because there's no place for them to park. People come late to the event, and we're concerned about that happening here. But the engineer assures me that that's not going to happen.
Has this been a problem with this facility?
No, not as of...
Okay, shouldn't be then,
not to this point.
because nothing is supposed to change that would affect that happening. It shouldn't, if it wasn't a problem before, it should not be a problem now either.
Well, my only concern is they're building a building 3,000 square feet. And
No, but it's the same operation.
Same thing.
It's exactly how it's been operating for the last 4 or 5 years. So you're not going to see a change, period.
Okay, I'll defer to you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll close then to the public, and next witness.
Thank you. I'd like to call Jim Miller as our planner.
Good evening.
You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please.
James Miller, Miller, 222 Nicholson Drive, Nichoolson, Moorestown, New Jersey.
Thank you.
And Mr. Miller, would you please provide the board with the benefit of your professional background and experience?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners as a certified planner.
That will do for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have the opportunity to review the site plan application, the master plan, the site itself, and the surrounding areas?
I did.
And could you please provide the board with your assessment of the site plan and proposed variances?
Yes, and I'm going to go right to the criteria because all the foundation testimony regarding the adjoining uses has been provided by the engineer, so I'll just go right to the proofs. This is a D3 variance. We have 2 conditions on site, which are deviations from your conditional use standards. The criteria for that type of variance is that the conditional use must show that the site remains appropriate for the use despite the deviation from the standards, and that's, of course, the standard from the Coventry Square v. Westwood decision.
That's the positive criteria.
That's the positive criteria under that decision, and I'll just go right through those criteria now. First, I believe that this site is going to advance 2 purposes in the municipal land use law. The first is purpose A, to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner that will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. And This is where I'll respond to the question earlier about the inherently beneficial use character of the site. Under New Jersey law and under New Jersey case law and statute, there's a concept called the inherently beneficial use. And that is basically a use which by its very character is beneficial to the public. And there's a series of uses that fall into this category. Some are statutory, some come out of case law. But religious uses, houses of worship, are definitely within that category and have long been considered inherently beneficial uses. And again, by being in that category, they're considered to advance the public welfare because they're an overall benefit to society. Secondly, I also believe that this use would promote Purpose G to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, and recreational, commercial, and industrial uses in open space, both public and private, according to their respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. And basically what this statement, what this goal does is it says that it's good planning to provide a variety of uses within the community so that you have services for all the people that reside in that community, and that also that the property be appropriate for the uses proposed. And I think you've seen from the plans that there's adequate capacity for the parking, the septic systems, the infrastructure that's necessary to support the use. I also want to address the specific deviations, and the first I'll address is the parking deviation. And the goal of that regulation is to ensure that there's a building intervening between the parking and the public right-of-way. And that's primarily an aesthetic kind of a control, because what you want to do is basically use the structures to shield the parking. And in the original application, that deviation didn't exist because the standard was met by virtue of the fact that the parking was located behind both the dwelling, that's the priest residence, and the garage barn structure, which was adapted to be the worship center. What's happening now is that the garage is going to be converted to a meditation area, and the primary worship facility is going to be located to the east of the existing parking lot. So that's what triggers the deviation. But there are factors which allow this site to continue to be appropriate for the use despite the deviation, and most of them are physical characteristics of the site itself. The first is that this is a relatively narrow site with extensive vegetation along the sides of the property and also in the front. And what that does is it occludes views on Elizabeth Avenue, either coming from the north or the south. You're screened by the vegetation, so you really don't see into the site. Secondly, you have the existing structures which achieve the intent, if not the letter of the condition, by being located in between the parking lot and the public right-of-way. And in this application, you also have a residential structure in the very front of the complex, so that you maintain the residential character of the streetscape along Elizabeth Avenue. So even though there's a deviation from the letter of the regulation, the full intent of the regulation is realized by this design. You have the screening, you have buildings intervening between the public right-of-way and the parking lot. So the site remains appropriate for the use despite that deviation. The second deviation has to do with the buffering and the fact that there are a couple of locations where we don't quite meet the exact letter of the standard. And the site remains appropriate even though there's the deviation from that standard, because you basically achieve, again, the goal of the regulation. There is screening on full screening, compliance screening along both the north and south property lines, and the only place where there's a deviation is in the rear of the property, and we feel that in this section there's such dense vegetation that to plant additional vegetation there would be counterproductive. You'd have to tear out existing vegetation to plant the new. And subsequent to the beginning of the hearing, we've also agreed to install the fence along the rear property line, which further achieves the objective of that standard. So again, the site remains appropriate despite the deviation, and I believe that under the positive criteria, we fully satisfy the applicable criteria, and that the site would meet the positive criteria as established by Coventry Square. So that brings us to the negative criteria, and under the statute, we have to show that the use will not result in a substantial detriment to the public good, and that the use will not substantially impair the intent or purpose of the zone plan. And in terms of the welfare aspect of that criteria, again, this is an inherently beneficial use, and as a house of worship, does contribute to the public welfare and satisfies that prong of the criteria. So for a conditional use, we have two additional prongs that we have to satisfy. The first is that the deviation will not result in such damage to the character of the surrounding area as to constitute a substantial detriment to the public good. And then secondly, that the deviation can be reconciled with the township's determination that the condition should be imposed on the use where it is otherwise permitted. In terms of the substantial detriment criteria, I would begin with the fact that this is an established use, so it's relatively easy to assess its impact on the surrounding community. And from what I can see from visiting the site and the surrounding area, I don't see any apparent detriment as a result of the facilities which are there. The requested relief is fully mitigated by the conditions that I cited when I talked about the positive criteria. So I don't see any detriment from the additional construction that's proposed. And
But wait a minute, aren't you, see what you're doing is you're basically bootstrapping the second building under the, by saying, well, the first building is fine, so if the first building is fine, then the second building is fine. I don't really necessarily follow that. That's a clever argument, but I think you have to address whether there's any detriments associated with the building of the second building, not whether the first building somehow makes the second building okay.
I'm getting there.
Well, you didn't sound like you were.
Okay. Well, first of all, the intensity of this use is not significantly changing, and so the overall impact on the surrounding community from an intensity standpoint is going to be virtually the same. Secondly, there is an additional structure being erected on the property, but that structure has attendant mitigation features, which include the added buffering. The buffering is now being extended back where the new construction is, so that you're going to have basically parallel buffering to what was there in the past. And in terms of the parking, it's screened, it's isolated to the rear of the property, it's buffered from the sides. So again, appropriate measures are being taken to mitigate any additional impact that's going to result from the relief that's being requested. And furthermore, none of these impacts would rise to the point where there would be a significant impact on the neighborhood. Keeping in mind, of course, that this is a D3 variance, and the use is a use which is anticipated as being appropriate to this R40 district. So the impacts you have are anticipated impacts, and the key here is to show that the site remains appropriate for the use despite the deviations. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does.
So that gets you to the second prong, which is to show that we can reconcile the deviation with the policy that supports the condition. And I would first start out by saying, in general, the site is conforming in that it meets the parking standards, it meets the bulk standards, it meets basically most of the standards in the conditional use, except for the two that we're addressing through the Coventry Square proofs. And It will not have a substantial or inappropriate impact on the neighborhood. Again, first of all, because the impacts are, for the most part, impacts that have been anticipated. It's a permitted conditional use. And that the deviations, again, have factors associated with them that mitigate those impacts. It's basically, the two prongs are sort of parallel in the analysis. And what they really boil down to are the impacts consistent with what the code anticipates, and where there is a deviation, does the site still continue to be meeting the objectives of those standards? And here that's the case, because really the first standard has to do with the parking location, and the objective again of that is to get the parking back in the site where it's not going to be visually obtrusive. That's been achieved. The purpose of the buffering standard is to ensure that there's adequate screening so that you don't have potentially an adverse impact on neighboring use, and the screening again is, I think, consistent with the objective of the code. So I think it's easy to reconcile these deviations with the purpose of the condition, and it satisfies the two prongs of the Coventry Square case which apply to this use. I would also add that in your planner's report, he asked us to address the balancing, and I think that's because with inherently beneficial uses, sometimes you apply the Seeker balancing test. So with that, again, the benefit of this use is it provides a house of worship for this particular religious body within the community. The detriments of the use are typically things like parking demand, traffic generation, those sorts of, the lighting, and through prior witnesses, you've already heard that in every case, the impacts of those effects of this use are all appropriate to the site and meet the standards. So in my view, the benefits of this use in this application far exceed any potential impacts on the community. The impacts, I think, are overwhelmingly beneficial, and if you apply any balancing test to this application, it would pass that as well.
Right, and keeping in mind the positive and negative criteria, would approval of the proposed house of worship be consistent with the zoning ordinances and master plan, in your opinion?
Yes, it would.
And do you believe the site would remain suitable for its beneficial conditional use were the requested variances be granted?
Yes. For the reasons I stated throughout my testimony.
Yes. And do you believe that the location of the proposed temple renders the building unobtrusive, somewhat unobtrusive?
Oh, yes, very much so, given the landscaping and the extensive setback from Elizabeth.
Okay. And do you believe that granting the requested variances would result in such a damage to the character of the surrounding areas to constitute a substantial detriment to the public good?
Not at all, and again, for the reasons I stated in my prior analysis.
And would granting the requested variances substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance?
It would not, and again, based on the Coventry Square criteria that apply to the negative criteria for this category of use.
And finally, do you conclude that the benefit of granting the proposed variances would substantially outweigh any detriments?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Anything from the board?
No, that's my question.
Then we'll open to the public. Is there anyone who would like to ask the planner a question based on his testimony?
Hi, Mark Chambers, 2045 Amwell Road. I'd like to know why you focus on the visual from Elizabeth and not the visual from Amwell Road, the residents on Amwell Road.
I focused on that because of the character of the standard that we were addressing through my testimony. The standard is basically deals with the relationship between the parking, the primary structures, and the main road on which the property is fronting. And so the testimony has to deal with that aspect. You know, what is the purpose of the condition, and do we meet that objective, even though there's a deviation.
So is there a
that's-
consideration for the distance from the side to the building and parking lot?
That's correct. That particular standard does not address that aspect of the.
Is there a standard that
site plan.
addresses from the side?
Yes, that would be the buffering standard.
And do you meet that standard?
Yes,
From Emma Road to the building and the parking lot?
yes.
Can you tell me what the standard is?
The standard for the side buffering?
From Emma Road to the parking lot?
Oh, there is no standard for that. The standard is for,
So it's okay if it's,
Let me explain. There is, around the perimeter of the property, they have to provide a certain amount of screening. And there's two different ways that they can meet that requirement. It's either a 25-foot wide buffer of triple staggered evergreen trees. I think it's 6 or 8 feet in height at planting. Or they can do a double staggered row of evergreen trees with a fence. So they have to provide screening around the perimeter of their site, meeting those standards. And what the testimony was is that he's testified that they meet that along the northerly and southerly sides. Along the back property or the east, they're not tearing the existing trees down to put in new trees. They're relying upon, their testimonies that are relying upon the existing vegetation, and during this testimony, they're adding a fence. But they technically they technically still don't meet because the requirement is technically that they have to provide a double staggered row of evergreen trees with that fence. They're not providing that, so that's the relief they need from the buffering.
you're referring to the east side now?
The east side, yep.
And, okay, so the amount of space with that double row on the south side is what, 20, is that 25 feet?
They have to provide either a triple staggered row of evergreen trees or a double staggered row of evergreen trees and a fence.
Is there a measurement for those rows? I mean, can those rows be?
If they do the double staggered row and a fence, it's a 15-foot wide area.
Okay.
It has to be at least 15 feet wide.
And that's here.
Right.
And they've also agreed that they're going to fill in any areas where there is a space that, rather than tearing out the trees, they're going to look, and if there's places that trees need to go in, and Mr. Healy will make sure that they abide by that.
Yeah, I think.
Because it's going to be in the resolution.
And that's not just on the south side?
No.
Okay.
It's on all sides where there's a potential gap.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, for the other part of the public, I'd like to make a statement concerning.
Before we do that, there was a question earlier about whether there was going to be any domes, and I don't believe the applicant provided.
Excuse me, we actually have an architect who's about to testify as well.
The architect's going to testify after the planner? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. And with that,
You raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Hold the microphone to your lips.
I do.
Your name and address, please.
Zach Moros, 6 Ashwood Court, Lawrenceville, New Jersey.
Would you spell your last name, please?
Moros.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris, could you please provide the board with the benefit of your professional background and experience?
Yes, I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey. I've been licensed for approximately 12 years. I attended Syracuse University. I attained my Bachelor's of Architecture. I've been practicing architecture.
We can accept that he's licensed in the state of New Jersey and he's practicing.
That's correct, yes. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Morris, did you prepare the architectural drawings for the temple?
That's
For
correct.
this site plan? And you're familiar with the site plan?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the zoning ordinance in Franklin Township, is that right?
Yes.
All right, can we use Exhibit A3 there? And if you could just briefly go through the plans you prepared and speak about the size of the building and its compliance with the ordinance.
Sure. The building is approximately 164 5 feet long by 45 feet wide. The extent of the building height is 20 foot 6 inches. And the dome that was discussed hits approximately 40, it's a square dome, and it tapers to a point, and the dome height is approximately 46 feet tall from finish grade. The exterior walls are going to be constructed of CMU, which is a concrete masonry unit, and it is going to be cladded with a granite stone, which we've brought. If people are interested, we have a sample of the stone. The roof of the temple and worship area, this portion here, which is in red and blue, is going to have a flat roof. It is the highest portion. If we call the building height 20 foot 6, there's a parapet that surrounds the roof, and that is the high point. The other areas are, this is a transition space that offers the steps and ramp to get into the upper portion of the temple. This will have a pitched roof. Same with the walkway will be a pitched roof, and the service area as well will have a pitched roof, but those will be significantly lower than the rest of the building. I can walk you through the program one more time, but that's it. It's a very simple building. From the roadway, when you look at it, it will appear to be a simple box with the dome, and it would be cladded with the stone. Very simple structure.
But the dome only occupies a small portion of the roof of that one side of the building, right?
That's correct.
What's the width of the dome?
I can get you an exact
Good.
dimension. It is 13 by 13 feet.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
so 13 by 13, but it's actually, it's 20 feet high then?
Yeah, approximately, yes.
Okay, all right. Is it illuminated?
No.
No.
What's the color? What's the color?
The color of the dome? I don't know. Gold.
Right.
All right, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Any board questions? All right, again, for the public, any questions for the architect?
It's just one question.
Your name and address again, please, for the record.
Michael D'Alessandro, D'Alessandro, 612 Elizabeth Avenue, Somerset, New Jersey. One question, and I would like to ask a question. If the parking turns out to be inadequate, will you commit to expanding the parking, going into the parking
This
bank?
is not a
Yes, we
question
will.
for the architect,
Oh, I'm sorry.
right? And
Question was for the engineer. I'm sorry.
parking has been cut back to 91 spaces. The rest of it's land bank, which means it can be built when it's needed.
And I can answer that question. If they have a habitual problem with parking, the township can make them improve those spaces.
Yes, but I'm asking you if they will
They-
consent to expanding it if the party's not
They don't
adequate.
have the ability to consent. We can order them to construct it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now, if there's anyone in the public audience that would like to make a statement, this is a time to do it. This is not necessarily questions for anyone, but your chance to be heard.
Mark Chambers, 2045 Emma Road.
Now's the time I get to swear you in, because you're giving your opinion.
Okay.
So could you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Again, I want to reiterate that as long as I've lived there, which has been since 2014, I've had no issue with the temple. The only concerns are future-looking with the proposed plan, and from what I've heard today, I don't anticipate too many other than the potential for growth. I mean, it's kind of when you build it, they will come, and the light and the noise. Unfortunately, I'm buying the house that backs right up to the parking lot. But beyond that, does anybody have an idea of when this is going to take place? When this could take place?
Within this year.
The building could start this year?
Yes, yes.
To be estimated completed?
Right. It's going to begin this year, but it will not be finished this year. It would probably be sometime, it would be sometime next year that it would be finished.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have.
Any other comments? Close to the public. Anything else from you?
No, I would submit that as our application. Thank you.
Anything from the board? Any discussion, questions?
I do. I just wanted to briefly return to the lighting. Was the solution of the light crossing over the property line, was the solution to put in house-side shields on all the perimeter lights?
Mr. Omen can answer the question. I believe it was angled.
The revised plan that was submitted, I want to say in September, rotated the one fixture about 20 degrees, which eliminated any light spill at the property line. Therefore, we comply.
Okay. Is the applicant, because it's .25 pretty close to the property line, does this fixture type come with a shield? Can you swap out the fixture for a shielded?
If it doesn't, we can always have a custom shield made if required.
Okay. I would like to see house-side shields on the perimeter new lighting, the residential area. The applicant can easily do that. I would like to see that.
That would be fine.
Did you say house side?
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, it's a shield of the bulb, so the light doesn't go behind the bulb.
Or with the new LED, they can change the optics too. They
Okay.
could change the shine so it only goes forward as opposed to
Throw,
down.
okay.
Yep.
All right.
So either way, they should look into that.
Okay. And I had another, I was looking at the landscaping plan. Is there any way you can substitute out the white pine for a more storm-sturdy species? The only trees we had down in this storm were white pine and Callery pear. Yeah. So if you could swap out all of the white pine for a different species like Norway spruce or Douglas fir or...
We could certainly do that.
Okay, because your white pines aren't going to last anyway, so you may as well invest in a sturdy tree.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine. And just to be clear, the LED lighting would satisfy your concern as well.
Right, if Mark thinks it satisfies it, I'm satisfied.
Thank you.
I think they could probably modify the optics a bit because it doesn't go beyond the property line, but it does spread out. They could probably find a different, change the optics a little bit just to make sure it's completely within the parking lot.
Anything else from the board? Look for a resolution.
Okay, I move that we grant the Sri Ramana.
Let me interrupt a second, I'm sorry.
Ramanuja.
Did you miss the opportunity to speak? Because I know you had a question before. So.
Did it get
we'll
answered?
Backtrack. If you have something that you'd like to say or whatever, do it now.
Mike Amberger, 600 Elizabeth Avenue.
I need to swear you in. Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, so the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So it sounds like a lot of the testimony is based on a promise that there'll only be 50 people and everything is going to remain in its current format. Yet, there's additional buildings, additional parking, and then even provision for more parking than that. What monitors that 50 and what happens if it's 250?
Well, I guess one of the things that I would say is, first of all, the town has had them build the septic system so that they can actually have up to 175 people at one time. I thought that what we would do is we would pass the resolution we would give them up to 175 people, since that's what it's built for, and since that doesn't really violate any of the application, the request that they have made. If they go over that number, they can be cited by the township for a violation and a citation. That's really the way that it works. You'll see when you hear this resolution that there are a lot of things that we're going to require them to do to try and keep what they're doing to be within the limits of the type of area that they're going to be in. But dealing with the number of people, if their town is having them build the septic system and they have the parking to support 170 people, my plan was to give them that number of people that could be there on any occasion. They only have one event all year that's outside. You'll hear that's going to be in the resolution too. And I wouldn't be so concerned if the way that this is supposed to work is that people can come and go as they choose. There's no real organized services. So I'm looking at this, and I listened to the people who testified, and I thought they testified truthfully. So I am going to try and fashion a resolution that recites what they want to do without leaving a lot of gaps for things to go the wrong way.
But is it safer to assume that the number could be 175 instead of 50?
I don't think it's safer. I think it's possible that it's possible. I think it's unlikely based upon what the testimony that I've heard. And if they did have 170, it would be even less likely that they would all be there at the same time. It doesn't seem like it's that kind of a facility.
Okay.
And I've heard a couple of these before, and I'm feeling pretty comfortable with this one.
Okay.
Remember, this facility has a history of, its operation has a history already. This is not a new facility that we're not familiar with in terms of their
Same
operation. They were here for an approval. They basically have a list of conditions. I guess, for want of a better word, they have established a credibility. And we try to anticipate the pitfalls, but we can't keep them from doing what they're able to be, rightfully able to do.
But for the new architectural plans, which I assume you don't have it for the buildings and whatnot yet, but are there any provisions where it would ease expansion going forward like there was for the previous run?
Well, there wasn't really anything that they did except install that extra, the water access, and they haven't indicated that there's going to be any plan to do anything here past what they have, and frankly, there's really not any room.
But what if they buy the next door neighbor, and that's, I think, about 5 or 6 acres?
They have to come back here, though. Either way, they have to come back here, and we have to rehear it again, so.
But it would seem to set a precedent if you already had stub outs for water previous, that it might happen again if it's not mentioned.
Anything they do new or different has to come back for hearing like this.
Okay.
If they added
And
50
there's
square
only
feet
so
to the
much we
building, they're
can
coming back.
restrict, really.
And if it's a new piece of land, it's just a whole new thing. I mean,
It just seems that the idea of zoning laws is to preserve the character of the existing area. and all of the other, everything else is single-family residences that are 20 feet tall, and now you're gonna have lights, parking lots, 46-foot domes. That doesn't seem to be the character of everything else in the area.
But remember, this is a permitted use.
Mhm.
It's not the use that we're talking about
Yeah.
tonight. Thank you. Okay, now we can
Yeah, it does.
address a resolution.
Right. I move that we grant Sri Ram Manaju Mission the D3 variance is necessary and approve the site plan that they have presented to build a new temple building at their location at 619 Elizabeth Avenue, Franklin, New Jersey, subject to the following restrictions. The building to be built will have a 1,200 square foot portion reserved for temple activities. There will be no formal group activities except for 3 events which will be held during the year in December and January inside the building, and in May outside of the building if the appropriate permits are obtained from the town. The lighting on the property should have house shields on the light fixtures on the perimeter of the property, or should otherwise use lighting equipment that reduces and eliminates any light moving in the direction of the perimeter of the property, that the building should be occupied at no time by more than 170 people, that the dome that they're planning on building should not be illuminated, that the buffer fence should go around both the north and south and the east sides of the building. The variance we're granting for the east side of the building is that they do not have to install the 2-layer buffer, but they will work with Mark Healy to identify areas in the south side, in the east side of that buffer where there are holes where additional trees should be planted, and the buffer shall not include any white pines, but shall include more tougher trees such as spruce or Norwegian fir trees, Norwegian spruce, that the property, that the temple will be open from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. With lights going off as soon after that as people leave the premises, but no later than 9 p.m. There shall be no overnight parking or people staying there overnight, except for the priests staying in the house. That there shall be a stove in the portion of the property in which the ceremonial food is prepared, and there shall be a refrigerator in the priest area of the restricted priest area of the building to allow for the storage of flowers. The food, the ceremonial food, shall be offered at 10:30 in the morning and at 7:30 at night, and may be given to the celebrants, but not, the celebrants shall not remain there to consume the food. That's all I have.
Any of the other leftover conditions from the previous approval remain?
Yes.
In fact, and you've covered a couple of them. The only one that's really eliminated, you have a minimal kitchen facility now.
Right.
All the other ones, they already agreed to. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, just one more. We do have a standard note for the land banking that should be added to the plans indicating that if it's deemed necessary by the zoning officer, we can enforce them and make them build the land bank spaces.
Do I need to say all that, or can we just add that to the resolution?
We can just add that to the resolution.
Good.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hold the board.
Raymond Bettervid,
4.
Alan Rich,
4.
Robert Shepherd,
4.
Anthony Caldwell,
4.
Gary Rosenthal,
Yes.
Cheryl Bugallo,
Yes.
and Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Okay, good luck.
Congratulations.
Hey, you're welcome. Good luck.
Good luck.
We'll take 2 minutes while we change for the next one.
Good luck.
Hey, good luck with it.
State of New Jersey. I'm here tonight representing Francis Parker McCarrick, a facility that is already located in this fine town. I want you to know the application's personal. And the reason that it's personal is that 50 years ago I made the best decision of my life by marrying my wife. 25 years ago I made the second best decision of my life by signing up on the waiting list for Francis Parker. Paid $50 for my wife, $50 for myself. I'm on the top of the list. And I'm there because I'm on that list because this is one of the finest elder care delivery companies in the world. I'm convinced, all right? So this is a labor of love. We have a slide presentation which will help to accelerate the presentation. The property we're talking about, as you know, is located at 15 Delwood Lane. It is an existing facility. What we're doing now includes skilled nursing care, post-acute care, short stays. We have 120 beds. If the facility is approved tonight, we're going to have the same skilled nursing but enhanced. We're going to have the same post-acute care but enhanced. What is new is adult daycare, all right, which is a terribly needed service. Same 120 beds. It's the same facility but enhancing what we can do. And what we're basically doing is adding 3 floors of approximately 25,000 square feet, of which only 8,000 square feet is for the adult care. The rest of the space is to enhance what we do for the people who are already using the facility. It's my intent to call 7 witnesses, and I can do it in an hour and 15 minutes, I promise, because most of them are very short witnesses. I have seated to my left Roberto Muniz, who's the CEO of Francis Parker, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the company. I have a citizen witness, a resident of Franklin Township, whose family uses the facility, and she wanted to just give 5 minutes about what it means to her and her family to have this facility in Franklin Township, and that's a lady named Joan Martin. My third witness is Jim Zauner. He is the actual operating person. He's the chief administrative person at the existing Francis Parker facility. Then our engineer, and he's going to be a little bit longer. He'll be about 20 minutes to describe the plan that's before you and to respond to the professionals' reports. We also have written responses to the reports, every single item, which we'll pass out, so you'll have a written record of it. And we're only going to talk about the places where we have a need for clarification. Then we have Randy Vonier, who's our traffic guy, who will deal with the issues of circulation on site, aisle width, and whether or not there's any traffic impact. We have Steve Leone, who's going to do 10 minutes telling you what the facility is going to look like, which is going to be just beautiful. And then we have, as our anchor man, a fellow named Marty Truscott, who's our licensed professional planner, who will give you the land use justification to go forward with the variances sought. Now, just for the record, what are we asking for? And the answer to that is the following. First of all, we are asking for a site plan approval. We are also asking for 2 use variances. The one use variance is the expansion of the non-conforming use for the nursing home and adult daycare facility.
because nursing home daycare facilities are not a permitted use in the R20 zone. And you obviously were there now because a prior zoning board thought it was a very good thing for Franklin Township. Secondly, we're looking for a height variance, which is also a use variance, because we are, your ordinance for the R20 zone says that the permitted height is 35 feet and 2.5 stories. We're seeking 48 feet and 3 stories. We're then seeking 3 bulk variances, and the bulk variances are the impervious coverage, where 25% is permitted, and existing is 31.13%, and proposed is 38.23%. Second bulk variance, aisle width, we are, ordinance says 26 feet, we're proposing 24 feet. And then finally, it may not even be a variance, it may be a waiver, but we advertise it either way, and that is with regard to groundwater recharge requirements. And that, as I say, may be a waiver, but we thought we'd be safe. So that being said, I'd ask that Mr. Roberto Muniz be sworn so that he can give testimony.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Your name and address, please?
My name is Roberto Muniz, Roberto Muniz, and I live at 536 Jackson Avenue, Township of Washington, New Jersey, 07676.
Mr. Muniz, what is your position with Francis Parker?
I'm the president and CEO for Parker for the last 19 and a half years.
All right, would you tell us about Francis Parker's facilities here in central New Jersey?
Sure. Parker was established in 1907 by Mrs. Parker in memory of her husband, Francis E. Parker, the original home. I'm sure probably many of you may already seen it in Landing Lane and in New Brunswick, the corner, the white building in the corner of New Brunswick. That was established in 1907. The second home is in Piscataway, New Jersey, on River Road. That was established in 1982. And in 2004, we began the construction of the assisted living in Highland Park, which is adjacent to the Piscataway location. We opened a new facility in Monroe Township in 2014 for nursing home as well. And in 2016, we acquired Parker and McCarrick.
Great. And so you have all these successful facilities. Why do you want to expand here in Franklin Township?
Well, one of the main reasons why we acquired McCarrick at that point was because it was a perfect fit for Parker. Parker is known for the quality of the services that we've been providing for this many years. It's a nonprofit organization. Mr. Johnson from Johnson & Johnson took a great interest in us as well. And through his efforts, we have been able to provide the quality and services that we've been providing for these many years. We knew that we had an extreme need, as you mentioned. We do have about 4,500 people in our registry for our nursing homes and assisted living. So if you're interested in getting an application, please make sure you do that quickly.
I'm in the top 5.
But it's a type of organization providing excellent care and quality and services for the people that we care for, nursing homes, assisted living, adult daycare, health and wellness center, and all that throughout central Middlesex County and now in Somerset here. When we acquired McCarrick, we noticed obviously that it was a great fit for Parker. However, the organization needed extensive capital improvements in order to make sure that the quality is given in an environment that is home-like and that it's it's done effectively. So therefore, we believe that it's important that we create a different environment that we can care for our residents and patients that we see in the post-acute care and the adult daycare as well.
Thank you, Mr. Muniz. Mr. Muniz available to the board for questions.
I'd like to ask a question. How did you enhance on McCarrick? I mean, what do you do now that McCarrick didn't do, or how are you better than McCarrick?
Sure. McCarrick has had a great reputation. The quality of care has been good. The people has been terrific. The staff has been just terrific. So therefore, we knew that it was a good fit for us. In terms of environment, it's very important for us. So we need to make sure that we create smaller environments where people can be cared better. small private rooms, for example, with bathrooms versus having to share a bedroom and a community bathroom, for example. So we're proposing to have semi-private rooms with full bathrooms and showers in there.
Well, didn't they already have that?
No, they did not. You just have a small, but a very small toilet and sink in each of the bedrooms.
Oh, because my mother was there, and there were two to a room.
They
had a bathroom.
A toilet and a sink. There's no shower, for example, in
Oh,
each
right,
of those
yeah.
bathrooms.
No
Yeah.
shower. There was a communal shower.
Exactly. So making the home smaller to a certain extent, instead of having 30 people in one floor, for example, those numbers will be reduced to 16, for example. So now you're going to have a larger room. You're going to have a full bathroom with shower in your rooms, and a community space as well. You will have some living space, dining room in each of the we call it neighborhoods, and that will enhance the quality of care for sure. In addition to that, we enhance it by bringing in more well-trained staff as well, and increasing the staffing patterns for them. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm glad that you had some experience with McCarrick, and hopefully it was a very positive
My mother
one.
was there for 5 years, yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
And it's good that it's located like in a neighborhood. You know,
Absolutely.
it's not a million miles away, so.
Yes.
Good location.
Great.
And we're going to prove that with our second witness. She was going to be our last witness, but the first hearing went on for the 2 hours. So we're moving her up in the batting order, and that's Mrs. Joan Martin. I'd ask that she come forward, be sworn so that she can give testimony. And this is a resident of Franklin Township.
Okay, for the record, we're going to hold off opening to the public for questions until after the witnesses are completed.
Could you raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Have a seat. Give us your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Joan Martin. I reside at 16 Opal Court in Franklin Park, New Jersey.
Ms. Martin, you have family using Francis Parker McCarrick now?
Yes, I do. My father has been a resident of Parker at McCarrick for approximately a year and a half now.
And how have you found the services delivered, and how has it impacted your family?
Well, my father and my family, we're very pleased with the services that Parker at McCarrick offers. My father came there initially for, I guess you would say, a respite, and as well as coming for rehabilitation. And as a result of the services that they offered because of his current state, we decided that that would be a good fit for him to stay even longer. So we have been very pleased with the services that Parker at McCarrick has offered. It just has been a benefit to our family because we were caring for him at home, and in his dementia state, it was very, very difficult. And so again, I would like to say that Parker at McCarrick offers excellent care, and as they are now embarking to have and expand in terms of an adult daycare, I could definitely can speak to that being an asset for the community, as we have a lot of senior citizens that live here in Somerset County, and they need socialization, and they need that time to be able to be with other seniors. So I think that is something that's very beneficial.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Ms. Martin's available for questions. Thank you so much for waiting.
You're welcome.
All right, we appreciate it very much. Our third witness is Mr. Jim Zauner. I'd ask that Mr. Zauner come forward and be sworn so that he can give testimony.
You swear that the testimony she'll give shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Name and address, please.
Jim Zauner. Address is 108 Sycamore Lane in Skillman, New Jersey.
Could you spell your last name, please?
Zauner.
Mr. Zauner, for the record, by whom were you employed and in what capacity?
I am an employee. I'm the administrator at, excuse me, at Parker at McCarrick.
Okay, so your job is to run the place, correct?
It is, yes.
All right, would you give the board a little idea of what services you're providing now, why you believe the expansion of space will be beneficial to to our clientele, and then tell us what we want to do. What are we adding?
Okay, great. Well, first, as you've heard, we have a 120-bed nursing home. 30 of the beds are dedicated to post-acute care, which is rehabilitation. People come in and then they go home after we get them better, either through rehab services or nursing care. The other 90 beds are dedicated to long-term care. As you heard earlier, many of our rooms are semi-private rooms, and the space is very, very tight. And another concern that we do often hear is there's not enough room for families to meet and space for people to just get some time away from others. And that by itself is going to be a huge advantage to not only the residents and family members are there, but also the staff. I mean, currently the environment is tight. It's built back in 1987 when most of the people that lived there were more mobile. Now it's people who are in nursing homes are generally in wheelchairs. So that is the additional space, which will almost double in size, is going to be a huge benefit. You heard the benefits of adult daycare earlier. We'll be adding 60 participants, which will be a mix of social as well as medical daycare.
What does adult daycare, what does that mean?
It's providing essentially the services are, and Parker provides that today at another location, is we will generally, we'll be responsible for transporting people to the home, and we will have special activity areas for them. They'll come in, say at 9 o'clock in the morning, and there'll be professionals there to either work with them on activities or medical needs, and then we drive them home afterwards.
Oh, and then they leave?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
so-
It's just adult daycare. It's a daycare for adults.
So the big advantage to it from a social and community point of view is that there are many people who do not want to go into a nursing home. This allows them to stay with their family, but while the family members are working, they have an opportunity to have activities, organized activities, and somebody to make sure that they take their meds.
Good.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we were talking about the expansion. We're talking about approximately 75,000 square feet of new space, 3 floors of about 25,000 each. No new beds, correct?
No new beds.
All right,
No.
so this 75,000 square feet, of which 8,000 is going to be for adult daycare. If you do the math, you get down to 68,000 square feet. That is space designed to enhance the programs you already have.
Absolutely.
Correct?
It's going from mostly semi-private rooms to private rooms. The therapy area will be providing services like aqua therapy and just services that we don't provide today. And the environment itself is going to be a huge help for those kinds of services.
Anything else you want to add?
No, that's it.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Zauner is available to the board for questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Our next witness is our engineer, Mr. Mike Thomas. I'd ask that he be called so that he can be sworn and give testimony.
You swear the testimony you're
Hold
about
the
to give...
microphone.
You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please?
Michael Thomas, 123 Pear Tree Lane in Franklin Park, New Jersey.
Thank you.
All right, for the record, Mr. Thomas, by whom are you employed and what capacity?
I'm employed by T&M Associates. We do consulting engineering, specifically with site civil and land use.
You can sit down, you know, if you want.
And you were part of the team that developed this site plan, correct?
Yes.
All right, would you describe for the board a brief description of your credentials so that you can be accepted as a licensed PE?
Sure. I'm a New Jersey licensed professional engineer. I have approximately 14 years of work-related experience in the specialty of civil engineering. I have a master's degree in civil engineering from NJIT. Also
It's
have
fine, we'll accept the credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, Mr. Thomas, the standard presentation. Tell us about the area, the surrounding properties, and the proposed project.
Sure, and I'll stand up for just this part. All right, so this is a color exhibit of the proposed conditions.
Can we mark that as A1 with today's date, please?
Sure. I try to reference this back because it's a little bit easier for you guys to see because it's colored. But I'm going to just start briefly with the existing conditions of the site, just to give you a brief overview. I'm going to revert back to the site plans that were submitted to the board.
So this is in the board's package?
This is in the board's package.
Okay.
If you guys turn to sheet 3 of the site plan set, sheet 3 of 16. So I'm just going to briefly discuss the surrounding conditions around the site. Generally speaking, the site itself is pretty well covered with an existing buffer. There's an existing vegetative buffer which covers the east and southern portions of the site. In addition to that, there are residences which are located to the west of the site, also with an existing buffer that's there today. To the south of the site, we have Delwood Lane, which is also known as 15th Street. Darlington Boulevard is located to the west of the site. It's kind of a unique road because it is not an official township right-of-way. It's a private roadway which runs on the back of the site. Delwood itself is a township right-of-way. The existing site has two existing, I'll call it entrances into the site. One is, or both of them are off of Delwood. They're located both on the, I'll call it the southwestern portion of the site. One of them is also leading into Darlington Boulevard. Once you're in the site, there's existing parking features as well as existing landscaping. The building itself, has an existing footprint of approximately 38,000 square feet. The existing parking spaces which are on site total about 164 spaces that are there today. This specific number it does exceed the existing parking requirement for facilities of this type with, per township ordinance. Some of the other interesting things about the site, the building is a 1 to 2 story building. There is an existing stream tributary which is located on the southern portion of the site. It's a tributary to the Raritan River. It doesn't actually connect into the Delaware and Raritan Canal, which is located not too far from the site where Easton Avenue is. But it runs on the southern portion of the site. There are existing wetlands which are located on the southern portion of the site, closer towards one of the existing driveways which leads into the site. In addition to that, like as mentioned, there's parking improvements. There is an existing loading dock which is in the rear, and I think that pretty much sums up the existing.
But tell us about our proposal.
Okay. Okay, so I'm on sheet 5 of the plan set, sheet 5 of 16. So essentially, what we're proposing on site is pretty much a zero net change when it comes to the number of beds that are being proposed. So there's 120 beds under existing conditions, 120 beds will be under proposed conditions, but there will be an expansion to accommodate the single room use for each patient inside. The proposed building addition, the gross floor area that's associated with it is about 77,000 square feet, so about 25,000 per floor, about 3 stories. The footprint of that is about 25,000 square foot, so you could sort of do the math. It's a little bit more than a half of acre, in size.
So you're going to be, so you're going to be adding 75,000 square feet with this new building?
The building itself is 75,000 square feet of gross floor area.
Right.
So that's for each.
Call it 77,000 and change to be totally accurate.
Correct. So just briefly to describe the parking that's on the site, as I mentioned, under existing conditions, there's about 164 spaces which are there today. We are increasing the number of parking spaces, not by a lot, but by a little bit, about approximately 23 spaces beyond that. So we're going to be up to about 187 total spaces on the site. There is an existing solar canopy, which is located on the northwestern corner. I'm sure if you've been out to the facility, you've seen it. We are not really touching that. The existing parking, which is underneath that, is going to remain as it is today. Some of the other existing features, the parking that we have are located in two general spots. The new parking, I should say. One is north of Darlington Boulevard. There was no parking that existed there previously, but in order to accommodate the new building expansion, we found our design to be best to locate that parking in that spot. In addition to that, there is parking located, I'll call it, on the south eastern corner of the building as well. There is parking there today, so it's just a different arrangement slightly than what is there today, but generally speaking, it's in the same location. In addition to that, we have a detention basin, which is actually not located on the same lot and block, or I should say on the same lot that the McCarrick facility is located, but is located to the southeast of the site. That detention facility is going to be expanded to accommodate the increase in impervious coverage, which is occurring on the project site. We looked at a lot of different scenarios of how to handle stormwater management on the site. We found this one to be not only the most economical, but also just the most amenable and easiest to construct and also to maintain on the site.
Can I ask you a question? So basically, you're going from 38,000 square feet to a little over 75,000?
No, add 38 to the 77.
Add 38 to the 77, okay. And is there going to be an increase in employees, or how does that?
So yes, the number of staff on site will increase because the level of care at the facility will also increase. So there will be an increase in staff. There's
Do you know by how much? I mean,
we have another witness who's going to provide a little bit more specifics.
Okay. And let me do a little clarification. Don't use 38 to add to the 77, add 52, because remember, this was a two-story building.
Oh, right.
So it's 52 in the existing building.
Right.
Add the 77 to that.
Right.
And the number that we're talking about with that is the gross floor area of the building.
Okay, I got it.
Cumulative. So as mentioned, the number of parking spaces is about 187 total parking spacing. There is a significant amount in order to meet ordinance requirements. We have additional landscaping improvements. We have directional signage and traffic control signage improvements throughout the site. We have a proposed monument sign, which is located, I'll call it, on the southern entry of the site. Right now on our site plan, it's actually shown not in conformance with the with the ordinance requirements with regard to setback. However, we will be locating that monument sign 25 feet to essentially conform to ordinance requirements. The sign itself, the size of it, the lettering, and so on and so forth will also conform to township ordinance requirements.
Let me stop you for 1 second. You may remember we were in to see you several months ago to get a temporary use permit in order to put up a construction trailer.
Right.
I don't know if you remember. It was an eye blink. We're in and we're out. The temporary construction trailer is also shown on the plans, correct?
Correct, and I'm going to point to it on here just for ease of clarity. So it's approximately located right here on the site plan. It had a 6-month permit associated with it.
But tonight we're extending that until the construction is finished, correct?
Correct, yes.
Did you look at the correspondence from the fire guy where he indicated you should add some fire lanes? Look at that?
And we're going to, what we have for the board, as soon as he gets the overall description of the project, we have a written line-by-line response to every one of the 5 reports.
Okay.
All right, so if you just hold the question for a bit.
So generally speaking, there's new patios and walks which are also being proposed. The building as well has 2 other small minor additions to it. One of them is approximately a 1,500 square foot dining room addition, which is located on the northwestern corner of the existing building. In addition to that, there's a 245 square foot vestibule, which is being added as well. And that is located on the north eastern corner of the existing building.
Excuse me, what about the outdoor patio? Are you going to expand that?
Yes, there is some expansion of the existing facility today.
I mean, it's nice just the way it is, but.
Right. Yeah, there is some expansion of the existing patios that are out there today. It's not just one. There's actually a few locations on the site which we're expanding. There are some additional sidewalks that are also included in those areas. But generally speaking, all these improvements are kind of centric around the existing building and the proposed building itself. We're not really expanding these improvements around the entire site and sort of on the edges of the site. It's really centric towards this, the building itself, and that's kind of like where the idea of keeping it is.
Good. Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, how about if we pass out the responses to all 5 reports and go through your professionals' reports?
It's fine.
Right. And I'd ask that it be marked as A1?
A2.
Or A2? I'm sorry.
Well, while you're doing that, maybe you can answer a question for me. Now, we're talking about a new building. What's going to happen to the old building? Is that going to be renovated?
So yes, the old building on the inside, it will be renovated, as needed. The extent of the renovations, can be discussed by the architect when he comes up to speak. But essentially, the old building will remain as is today.
But renovated,
But
and our architect will have to describe that for you.
So you're still going to use it? I mean.
Oh, of course.
Usable.
Just one other note as well, there's an existing loading dock, which is on the existing building. That more or less is going to be maintained under proposed conditions. We are proposing a new compactor, which is going to be on site. The intent of the compactor, as opposed to having dumpsters, is it will be enclosed and essentially will be removed and unloaded once every couple weeks or so.
So for the record, Mike, the response to the reports that we've just generated and passed out to the board members were all prepared by T&M, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I direct your attention to the engineer's report to the Zoning Board of Adjustment from Scott Thomas, senior engineer, dated February the 20th, 2018. You've now taken every comment that was in the engineer's report and provided a written response. I don't think there's any need for us to talk about all the items that we're complying and agreeing to do, but where there's a need for any kind of clarification, we should talk about it. So, for example, on the first page, number 4, and by the way, the numbers line up with the numbers in the comments by the engineer. So if you look at comment number 4, which says provide details of the 2 10 by 25 and 1 by 20 pads, explain their proposed use and what they'll be constructed of. Your answer to that is?
So there's really 2 uses for it. One is for the generator, which is being proposed on site. There's an emergency generator, which is required for facilities of this nature. Right, yeah. In addition to that, the trash compactor, which I just mentioned a few minutes ago.
All right. Number 5 said enclosures should be constructed for the dumpster area near the solar arrays if it is to remain. And your response to that is?
So we're actually not proposing any dumpsters. Again, the trash compactor will be used on site instead.
So therefore, an enclosure is not needed, correct?
Correct.
All right. Take a look at item number 7. Number 7 says the engineering department recommends that decorative fencing be installed along the detention basin and along the sidewalk in front of the addition because of the proposed steep slopes. And the response is?
So there's an existing guide rail that's there today. We're just looking to extend that beyond where it is right now for safety reasons, obviously, to the basin and otherwise.
And let's now look at the environmental comments. Page 2 of our memo, page 3 of the engineer's memo. Item 16 says, no environmental impact report or statement has been provided, and your response is?
We did actually submit an environmental report, but we obviously can provide any additional copies that may be needed.
Okay. And then the next comment is number 17. It says the site plan shows wetlands and an associated 50-foot wide wetlands transition area along the southeasterly portion of the property. An NJDEP approved letter of interpretation shall be provided due to the proposed re-engineering to be done around the nearby detention basin. orange construction fence is required in areas near to the wetlands transition area limits to deter disturbance, and your response to that?
So with regard to wetlands on site, there's really two key points. The first is that T&M has been on the site 2 separate times to delineate the wetlands that are on there. With regard to the buffers that are associated with those wetlands, rather than going through DEP through a regulatory LOI or a letter of interpretation, we actually obtained an applicability determination from the flood hazard area department over there. And in that applicability determination, we learned that the buffers that are associated with those wetlands would be 50 feet. So when we designed this site, we elected to stay outside of both the wetlands and the associated buffers that are with them, which is why we did not officially make the submission to DEP, because we're just staying outside of it.
If I could suggest that you have a conversation with the engineering department about that.
You'll be happy to discuss with the engineer, correct?
Sure.
Okay. I direct the board's attention to page 4 of the engineer's report and page 3 of our responses. It's item 23. Grading and pipe installations are proposed on adjacent lot 3909. Demonstrate construction agreements are in place allowing that work. We provided for the board's file. There should be a letter in the file from the adjacent property owner indicating that the minor grading that's at the edges are not an issue, and they're very happy about it, quite frankly. So that letter is in your file already. Then if you would, turn to item 37. Item 37 says, Township Engineer, I'm sorry. Item 37 says, there is a footbridge across the stream connecting the subject property to lot 39.04. If this bridge is utilized frequently, the applicant should consider installing a crosswalk across the driveway and extend a sidewalk from the building to the crosswalk. And your response?
So the footbridge that we're talking about here is actually located, I'll point to it on the plan, it's just south of the detention basin over here. It's not on the property that is owned by Parker, or the properties that are owned by Parker. Because the fact that the footbridge was originally designed and intended for the same property owner between different lots, those properties have now have different property owners. So that it's not expected that footbridge will have really very frequent usage at all, and it's not really encouraged that they go between properties since they have different property owners. So we have no specific belief, I guess, that any additional pedestrian crossings would be needed.
Let me. I really would be doing this with the traffic guy, but as long as you're up as an engineer, let me point everybody to 36, which says Township engineering standards require 26 wide aisle berth within parking areas, and we're requesting a waiver and variance for this condition. But in your opinion, as a licensed professional engineer, the 24-foot aisle is more than adequate from your engineering point of view?
Yes, it's very typical to use 24 foot as a minimum. 24 foot is what we designed on here. It's just important to note that T&M, we have sized these roads and designed them to accommodate emergency vehicles such as fire trucks and otherwise to traverse through the site. So they are adequately sized, and those types of vehicles and also even larger vehicles can traverse the site.
And more information to come when we get our traffic guy up here. So item 45, the applicant is requesting a waiver from recharge requirements due to a shallow bedrock issue. Would you respond to that?
Sure, and we have had preliminary geotechnical testing on the site. We found that there was shallow bedrock and also high groundwater conditions for this particular site. Given these conditions, we are asking for a waiver from the recharge requirements with stormwater management. We believe that by putting in something that actually does recharge, we'll have great difficulty doing so, or just may not work at all. So, but we do have some geotechnical testing that has been completed and done, which substantiates that.
Okay, I have a question that perhaps our attorney can answer. Who grants the waiver? The zoning department or us in our
in our infinite wisdom, right?
Yes. This would be a waiver to be granted by this board.
Okay.
And that completes the engineering report, which is the biggest one. Everything else on the, and there's, I guess, well, how many items on that? There's a zillion items on that, but for the things that we mentioned, there are almost 50 items on that. We agree and will comply with all of them.
If I can make a suggestion about the waiver, we haven't heard from our engineer about that. Typically, both boards kind of defer to the engineer as to whether they've satisfied the requirements for that waiver. So if you're inclined, you might want to, if you're inclined to approve the application, waive the application subject to the approval of the engineer. And if the engineer's not satisfied, they'll have to come back. You haven't heard from the engineer.
You mean grant the application subject to the,
Yes.
right.
Yeah, I don't
not
think it's
waive
fair
the
to the board because you haven't heard from your engineer about this request. So
All right.
I think you defer to our engineer, and if the engineer doesn't feel the waiver is appropriate, then they'll have to come back.
Sounds like a plan.
Oh, I have a question.
So
Is-
if the board goes that way, we understand that, and we understand you're granting the waiver contingent upon the engineer concurring with our engineer about the need for it. We got it. We're in.
Is DRCC reviewing the stormwater on this?
Yes.
We already have the application in front of them.
Right, did
We're
you get a review letter from them
We did, saying they wanted some more information. We haven't
on
gotten
the recharge issue?
No, not on the, I think it was on the other stuff in DRCC.
Yeah, there were some outstanding issues, but, among the ones was stormwater management, but it did not include recharge, though.
And we know we have to get it. That's an outside agency approval. We have to get it before we can go forward. So let's take a look at the environmental report. Very short and to the point. It's our page 8 in responses. Number 1, Francis Parker Memorial Home, impervious exceeds required number, suggest using pervious asphalt for parking lot addition, thus reducing impervious coverage. Any response to that?
So this issue more or less has to do with the same issue with the recharge, in that there's shallow bedrock at the site. Any rainwater that is infiltrated in the ground will travel over the bedrock and will cause a migration of fines in the substratum. So essentially, this will create unstable conditions on the site. But generally speaking, this is a very similar issue having to do with the groundwater and the similar conditions.
So what are you saying? What's the conclusion? That you
Are you saying that, in your statement, are you saying that's a neat idea, but it won't work here?
Correct.
I think you're right on the.
Right.
We'd like to hire you
Right,
to
but
be
he
a
wasn't
witness.
saying it right away, so.
All right. Well, we appreciate the prompting. It's not practical. That's the bottom line. And that's, we're saying it.
And what's the, how far are we over on the impervious coverage?
It's 38%, approximately 38% is what we're proposing.
Yeah.
Under existing conditions, it's approximately 31%.
Okay. And what's, of existing conditions, isn't there also what's permitted in that zone?
25% is what's permitted. in the
Okay,
zone.
that's a more important number for me. All right.
Yeah,
So
there's-
do
there's
our
an existing
engineers have to waive that
No, we gotta
idea?
get, that's part of our, that's a variance.
It's a
we're looking
requested
for.
bulk variance to the board. Item 2.
Oh, I have a question. Does the shallow bedrock and high groundwater exist everywhere, or is it just in certain pockets?
Well, this particular site, as well as many others throughout Franklin and also, and frankly, around this entire region, this is a shale type of region. I'm sure many people know about that. Water, when it passes through there, or at least groundwater, traverses laterally rather than up and down. So there's traditionally higher groundwater levels that are here. They also have conditions what's called a perch condition, where the groundwater can actually almost kind of like pop up out of the ground, if that makes sense. That happens often when you're excavating in a particular site. But generally speaking, this site has those similar conditions and those similar characteristics, which is why we're asking for the waiver from groundwater recharge. Making this request over here having to do with porous asphalt. Porous asphalt is generally intended to recharge. Generally intended, doesn't always have to be, but it's generally intended to recharge. We feel, at least on our head, based on the information we receive from geotechnical engineering reports, that groundwater recharge is not a good candidate for this site. And that's why we're asking for the waiver from that. We are still satisfying the remaining NJDEP requirements regarding stormwater quality and stormwater quantity. And that's going on in the existing dry basin, which is there today, which is being expanded.
Did you do test pits to see if it recharges naturally now?
Test pits have not yet been conducted within the existing basin limits.
Okay, so maybe our engineer will require something like that? We don't know.
That's why I requested that the engineers talk.
All right. So item 2 on the environmental report also suggests solar panels on roof to offset loss of impervious coverage. And your response to that, Mike?
So there's already solar panels which are located on the site. They're not proposed. They're existing that are there today. So those are going to remain unchanged from existing to proposed conditions.
Right. And I'll just add another item to that. The law in New Jersey, state law, is that the panel is not to be considered impervious coverage. So it doesn't change the equation. The only thing that counts is whatever the base is, the 1 inch in diameter base that it may have. But other than that, it's not impervious coverage by state statute. It doesn't change anything. And the proposal is to keep the solar panels there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then let's go to the Director of Fire Prevention's report. And that's found on page 9 of our memo to you. It says we're agreeing and complying with number 1. Number 2, we're agreeing and we'll coordinate with the fire marshal. Number 3, we'll agree and we'll coordinate with the fire marshal. And number 4 is agree. And I remember one gentleman had a question. I don't know if that answers the questions. Okay. Next report is the response to the Public Works Memorandum dated February 14th, prepared by Carl Hawk. First one is agree and comply. And then number 2, it says, will any new service connections be required for the addition, domestic water or fire sprinkler? And the answer to that is
no. With regard to water, we're reusing what is currently there today.
And then on page 11 and 12 and 13, we have the planner's review. And I'd ask that you hold those comments until we get to the planner. We're going to have a planner up to respond or to provide the testimony required. So that completes the reports. Anything else you want to add? Mike, anything else you want to add?
No.
Mr. Thomas is available to the board for questions.
I have a question.
Did I miss it? Did we go through Mark's letter?
Yeah, I think they said, he just said the planner's going to address it, but there are comments in there that are site plan related.
Right.
And a few that are probably more for the architect. Comment number 2, I was asking about the screening. Is the planner solely going to address that, or is that more? Because part of the question is
that sounds a little engineering-ish.
Yeah.
So number 2, existing screening earthen berm as shown on figure 4 and 5 below. There currently exists earthen berming up to a height of 10 feet that serves to screen the facility from adjoining homes to the west. The application proposes to eliminate the earthen berming. I recommend that the applicant investigate site modifications, for example, elimination of proposed parking, use of retaining walls, to that would serve to retain screening provided by the existing earth berms. You want to respond to that?
Sure. So what's sort of interesting about that berm is that the maximum height of it is still lower than the residences which are located to the north of it. So the berm that we're referring to is actually where our proposed northerly parking area is. That's there today. So the height of that berm is actually lower than the height when you get up beyond Darlington Boulevard to where the existing residences are. To the northbound side, it's actually lower in height than that. So that berm is actually not doing the screening, so to speak, that you might think it would be if you were at eye level, if they were at the same level. That said, our landscaping plan that has been provided does provide additional screening for that area. In addition to that, there is a pretty heavy existing condition screen which is there today, which is just north of Darlington Boulevard. It's pretty thick in its existing character, and it should provide sufficient screening, we'll call it, to the site that's there today.
Were there other
Any other
engineering?
questions?
Yeah, what I would suggest on that topic is there is going to be testimony about presenting the building itself and
Yes.
the height
Architect,
variance.
yep.
So you might want to keep this issue in mind, the sufficiency of the screening in relation to the variance the height variance that's proposed. So just keep that issue of screening I'll say to the north, but to the top of the page in mind. Proposed parking, is that a architect comment or engineer comment? And the question is, they're seeking an impervious surface variance. They have, at least per our ordinance, a lot more parking than our ordinance requires. So obviously that goes to the impervious surface variance. And when I compared at least the amount of proposed parking to the staffing levels that are in the traffic report, it just didn't seem to mesh. So I believe they need to provide some testimony explaining the need for I think it's 187 total spaces, and then therefore the need for the impervious surface variance.
So I think that's actually an operations question. I think you need to
Whoever-
know the utilization of the parking lot for a facility like this. So, Mr. Zauner, if you would, maybe grab that microphone and tell us about the need for this parking.
Okay, well, currently, we had 100 and, I'm not sure, I just know by as far as the number of spaces that are available. And when you look at the number of employees that are there, visitors, volunteers, and we also have 15 spots are provided to Great Expectations as something that we've agreed to in the past. So as you start to look at in the future, the additional staff that we will be adding, alone for daycare, that'll be another 20 to 21 people that would be required to run an operation of that size. And you start adding in again, visitors and family members, we're expecting an increase in the overall volume. Additionally to that, we'll be providing the transportation for daycare as well, so there'll be a need for parking spaces for the vehicles that we have.
So is there any question in your mind that you need this parking?
No, not at all. I'm there day to day, and I see what the operation is like. Today we have people parking all the way in the back of the facility in order to visit us. And many of the folks that we have visiting us are older as well. So
You have sufficient handicap?
we do. We're meeting the code, yes.
But, just one thought here for the board's consideration too. You don't have, other than warehouses, you don't have generally applicants who are saying, I need more parking than your ordinance or
Right.
your review might suggest. This is based purely on their operation, and not just here, but Piscataway and the other facilities. These facilities require the parking in order to function properly. And otherwise, you get the vans and the deliveries and the whatever in the middle of the aisle, and that's not good either.
So what do you attribute the higher volume to? I mean, I know the adult daycare is a new thing, so that'll increase the volume.
That'll be, in checking with my colleagues that opened up an operation in Piscataway, there are 21 staff members every day that are required to operate that. And then on top of that, the one mix that we are changing a little bit is we're going to be adding a few more. We're not adding more beds. We're just adding a few more post-acute. Just the overall volume and the desire, frankly, we're going to have a lot more space for people to come and visit. So the likelihood of people coming and visiting will increase.
This is a very interesting application because we're dealing with issues like parking and groundwater recharge and And the answer that we keep getting back from you guys is that, oh, I'm sorry, we can't do anything about that for one reason or another. And it doesn't feel like you're trying that hard. We have the reason you can't put in the impervious or pervious parking material is because the groundwater is too high, but you really haven't talked to anybody about that, and yet you're looking for us to allow you to do that. And I feel like you've come in, you've got such a great project that we're supposed to close our eyes to all of the warts that are going on here and just let the whole thing go through. Now, every time I hear, well, I don't think we can do anything about that, it's not making me that excited about the project. I'm not number 1 or 5 on the list, so I'm looking at it as an outsider, and I live in the town, and I got to make sure that what you're doing is the best job you can do in presenting this and following all the rules here, and I'm not getting that sense.
So with regard to groundwater recharge, and I know the engineer is not here, but with regard to groundwater recharge, it's actually dictated by the NJDEP and their regulations. It's not Franklin Township per se. I mean, they could have their own, but it's actually dictated by NJDEP.
No, I'm talking more about, the issue is not really, you can tell me what you want about groundwater recharge. I'm not going to be able to say much about that. But we're talking about, and you kind of like gave me a sleight of hand with this. When I asked you what's the impervious coverage, you told me 38%, and you said it's 31% now. And I had to ask you, what is it supposed to be? And then you told me it was 25%. Well, that's 13%, if I'm counting correctly, and you don't seem to have any interest or concern or any kind of good ideas about how to bring those numbers down. You just need more parking. You can't use pervious coverage. You're not helping me here.
Well, respectfully, in the case of parking, the best indication of what you need is the actual operation of the site. And you have the actual operator of the site saying they want to have a site that works safely and has sufficient parking. And the point of the application is to expand this by 77,000 square feet. There's going to be a need for additional parking. Nobody's trying to get over on the town, and most applicants would say, let's go cheap, let's not ask for more parking, because that's a cost to us. It's a cost not just for the asphalt, it's a cost for the change in the detention basin, where you're going to have to do additional engineering solutions. So, respectfully, nobody's trying to show any disrespect to Franklin Township's ordinances, but you have a situation that is different. That's why you come to the zoning board. Sometimes you need some help with variances in order to make it work. And I think the answer on the porous asphalt, that's easily handled by the town's engineer. If the town, I don't know if the town's engineer has been approving porous asphalt in Franklin Township. I mean, I think it's kind of like a nice idea from the Environmental Commission, but there are practical difficulties. This is an area with not only high groundwater, but with bedrock. All right, but if your engineer says we're wrong, listen, we're willing to take that. That comment from the Environmental Commission was consider this as an alternative. Not that it's from an engineering point of view practical. I mean, it's easy enough for Mr. Healy to ask your town engineer what he thinks. We're not trying to get over. We're just trying to have a site that works and is safe. And we know it because we have 5 other sites in Middlesex County, and we see them operating every day. We service thousands of seniors in Middlesex County. It's a pile. I mean, so we're not new to this business. We're in the business over 100 years. And if there's anything that sounds like any disrespect to Franklin Township, that's not what it's about. We want to have a well-operating facility. That's what it comes down to. And yeah, he gets a little bang on the knuckles. He should have gone to said right off the bat, it's 25%. I think he may have misunderstood in terms of existing. So we apologize for that. Were there any other engineering comments?
I'll point them out, and that way we'll get to them directly.
Yeah, please.
So 4A you've addressed already. That's the I think you've testified that you're going to amend the plan to eliminate that clearing out of the 150-foot stream corridor ordinance of the township. 5B, you've said that you're going to comply with the pylon sign. 4C, what I would suggest is, I think there are, as we've discussed, a number of technical things that we should have a meeting, I think, with staff. I think once we meet, I think you'll understand that these sidewalk connections I'm talking about on site are pretty modest. So I'd suggest we leave 4C to a discussion with staff. And then 4D, I suggested that the board may wish to discuss a sidewalk connection. This is kind of similar to the Environmental Commission. You know, there is just generally a desire on the part of the township to have connections from facilities out to the sidewalk connections along the street. I understand there are some restrictions, so if you could address that.
Sure. And the sidewalk connection that you're referring to has to do with the existing driveway on the southern side of the site. So what was mentioned before, there are wetlands and also an existing stream tributary, which is the tributary to the Raritan River, which exists on the southern portion of the site, sort of where my finger is pointing right here. And it extends beyond to the south of the basin and then continues further south and east of the site. Because of those restrictions, that installing sidewalks or really any improvements within those areas is going to require additional exacerbation of those environmental areas, and additional permitting would be required. So our intent was, when we designed this plan, was to stay out of environmentally sensitive areas. That was our intent. And that's what we tried to do to the greatest extent practicable. As you can see on the site where the building is located, these things were very specifically chosen under the existing constraints that are there on site today. So that's why we designed it the way we did, was to stay out of those areas, and that was the intent.
If I could comment too, if this was an apartment complex or a townhouse development, something of that, I would strongly recommend that they connect that development to the sidewalk network along the street. I think the operational characteristics and the residential population that are going to live here, I think, are probably a little bit different than a townhouse and apartment complex. But nonetheless, it's my job to kind of bring that to your attention, and you can decide whether you feel it's appropriate to, not make them do that. But as far as the other comments, 4H, I think, is really more of an architect comment about the use of the basement. 4G, Chapter 222, actually, that is something that we address at the time of site plan, not during a separate permit. When you have a site plan, it's going before the board. So you can address that during compliance.
Yes.
That's not something you need for the board. And I think the rest of them are, I think, largely site plan comments. I'm assuming your response is that you'll comply?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
And it actually says that on each of the items on the memo.
Did we talk about the COA fee?
I think that, I'm not really sure, I don't really think that's really a board decision.
Right.
I think it really comes from the state's residential fee. I think the applicant's attorney needs to look into that. I need to look into that, and we need to, I think it's exempt.
I do too, but whatever the law is, it is. And if
Yeah,
we're
and
required to pay it, we'll pay it.
And it's not really, it's not something that, it's not a zoning requirement, so it's not really a board decision.
I think that completes the reports.
Any other questions from the board? Okay.
All right, very quick traffic presentation. I'd ask that Mr. Randy Vonier come forward and be sworn so they can give testimony.
You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Name and address, please.
My name is Randall Voinier. It's Randall. Last name is V as in Victor, Oinier. I reside at 152 Elm Street, Rockaway Township.
For the record, Mr. Vonier, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the firm of T&M Associates. I am one of the traffic engineers, a professional engineer working out of the Bloomfield office. As Mr. Thomas said previously, we're a civil engineering firm, multifaceted firm. I happen to be, my specialty is in traffic and transportation engineering and traffic planning reports.
Licensed in New Jersey.
Licensed in New Jersey since 1984, and I think
Very
I've
good.
stood in front of this board once a long time ago.
Okay, we can,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, of course, as a part of your professional activities on this application. You've studied the site, I assume,
Yes, I have.
and I think you need to talk to the board succinctly about traffic generation, site circulation, parking, and aisle width.
Okay. I'll go up to the board a little bit closer and just point out the places that are of concern for a traffic engineer when he's studying a site that's either being built or being expanded. As you know, this is the original building that is here. The expansion is the shaded gray area. This is an existing parking area that's being reconfigured as part of the proposed plan. This is a delivery area back in the westerly portion, which is being expanded to house some parking as well. The solar array, or the solar cells, that whole area is not being touched at all. It used to be continuous all the way down from west all the way to like the east of the existing building. And now with the new configuration of this parking and the flow of the lot through here, there's been a creation of another minor midway aisle that goes along the internal roadway. So now we have a few more access points here, a couple that come out here at the bottom of the lot, this one that serves the canopied area, and also for the buses that take the adult daycare people back and forth to the stoppages right in front of the new building. So in studying the site, I wanted to get an estimate on how many people would be coming to the site, as Mr. Zernan had stated previously. With the advent of this, the adult daycare, it requires a few more employees, and I didn't talk to him personally, but I did hear from staff that he does need about 20 or 21 more people on staff to serve those people that come in adult daycare. Also, since the floor area is increasing by about 75,000 square feet, there's more floor area to maintain. So there's a few more maintenance people that are also going to come into the site as well. So 21 for maybe 25 more people like that. I'm assuming worst case scenario in that they might be all driving in single occupancy vehicles, so you add that kind of traffic also to the site. So what I did was to investigate the operations of roadways around the site. I investigated 3 intersections, 3 that I thought might be most important in terms of how this may be impacted. And one was the 2 ring roads and how they intersect. This one over here on the west side intersecting Darlington Boulevard, this one on Delwood Lane, intersecting the other side of Parker's driveway. And I also investigated the intersection of Delwood Lane and DeMott Avenue, which is off the plan here. That DeMott Avenue, as we all know, that's like a main arterial that connects all the way to Easton Avenue, and it acts like a fairly popular connector to Easton Avenue eventually, 287 to places north to places south. So I investigated those 3 intersections during the worst time of the day. And what is that? It's when we commute back and forth to work. I found that there were peak hours around 7 to 8 o'clock in the... Yes, sir.
Did one of those intersections, is it Willow Ave and Delwood Lane? Because that also goes directly down to Easton Avenue.
Right. But
was that one of the intersections?
No. One of them was DeMott and Delwood, which is right down over here, and the 2 accesses to the driveways, to Parker's driveway. So that's this one on the more southerly side, and this westerly one on this side. So the way traffic is distributed, and the reason why I didn't use Willow Avenue is because, in my recollection and seeing what kind of volumes are going through here, a lot of the people are going to go down DeMott and go to Easton Avenue. So that's why I investigated that intersection. Most of the people are coming out of these 2 access roads, so I investigated these 2 intersections. The bottom line is, under existing conditions, since it's an existing operation, levels of service, if you've ever had that explained to you by a traffic analyst or a traffic engineer, levels of service are pretty good at these 2 driveways. like level of service A. The report card says you got A's all the way through here on left turns, right turns, and through movements. And then down here at Delwood and Demont Lane, there's a level of service C for those that have to stop at the intersection, at the stop sign. I added the traffic. You might have seen it in my report showing about 20 vehicles coming in the morning, a few vehicles coming out in the morning. It's really not that significant an addition of traffic through here. And by the way, if you look at the description that I showed, a lot of these streets, and Delwood is not a very busy street, Demont a little bit more, but it's still operating way under capacity. So when you add just a little bit more traffic to it, it's really not changing that much in terms of its level of service. So operationally, it's still doing a good job. So when you add the traffic, based on the extra employees that I was just talking about, the 24, 25 employees, maybe a few guests, maybe a couple more deliveries, the levels of service don't change for any intersection with the exception of one that goes from level of service A to B, which really won't be visibly perceptible through here. So good part about traffic and circulation is you add the facility, because you only have the same 120 beds, but you are adding the employees and a few more workers for maintenance, a couple of more guests, some more visitors. It's going to be little or no perceptible impacts on these streets. I realize that Easton Avenue goes through its gyrations during the peak hours, but if you're adding only 15 to 20 more cars to it, again, you won't really notice the effects that are happening down by Easton Avenue.
How about site circulation?
So for site circulation, we have, it's almost continuous, or the same way as it always has been, in that these two driveways aren't going to change. There was an existing driveway which was servicing this entire lot. The lot is being configured. It's like turned 90 degrees, so we have more openings through here. We also have a circulation area where the buses that the Parker representatives were talking about are going to bring in the adults around 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and they'll probably pull them into these drop-off areas right through here. So what's going to happen is they're talking about manning 4, maybe 5 buses to do that, and they're going to be picking these people up pretty much for the most part at their homes, local areas. So they're only going to have like 4 or 5 different trips in the morning. When these people come in, the buses will park for the day, and then in the afternoon when they leave, you'll have like 4 or 5 more trips with all those adults leaving.
Is that driveway a one-way circulation?
This one, sir?
The one where the buses are going to go?
It can go through here, and they can pull up right next to the door.
Right.
Right here. Or if this has 2 buses in it and they can't fit, there's a couple more over here that you can drop off.
Yeah, but the question is how wide is that driveway? Are buses going to get past one another, or is it going to be just a single direction of circulation there?
This one, where the cross-hatching is like an 8-foot wide cross-hatch and a bus. These are like those mini buses with the shorter wheelbase.
Yeah, but they're still wider than 8 feet.
Yeah, but how about if we answer the question?
Okay.
One way, correct?
This is one way going through here. This is 15 feet wide as a bypass lane. They'll be able to bypass those buses that are parked. And the same goes for this side, on perpendicular to it. An 8-foot wide parking area and a 15-foot wide passage lane.
Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Smith.
Okay.
That's what it is.
So listen, we're asking the board to grant us a bulk variance on aisle width. The standard in the town is 26 feet. We're asking for 24. So number one, I'd like you to comment on the 24-foot aisle width in the context of this site plan, and then generically about the safety of a 24-foot aisle width.
In my experience in designing parking areas, we usually use like a 60-foot module, and that means like 2 18-foot-long spaces and a 24-foot wide aisle. That's used as a really standard practice for just about all land uses that you can think of, retail, office, and in this case, it would also work in terms of this facility as well. In terms of maneuverability, I believe that we do have some turning templates that we put through here, for the type of emergency vehicle that would service this type of building, and they would be able to maneuver all through this area and through these lots as well. So in my opinion, the 24-foot wide aisle is adequate for this facility.
So why do they require 26? I mean, if 24 is adequate, why is the rule 26?
I do not know. Not being a part of the decision-making in the township, it's more conservative, it provides more room, but in my opinion, in the hundreds of plans that I've seen and designed, I've always utilized 24-foot aisles for 90-foot.
Mark, can you answer that question?
The reason of why, I can't tell you. I can tell you that it's in our ordinance, that's 26. Before I worked here, I worked in consulting for 15 years, and I can agree that the standard is 24.
And this
In
is
most
also
towns,
supportive, I'm sorry.
in most ordinances, and I'll add too, if this was, we have 26, if this was a shopping center, something with higher turnover, maybe you might want to be a little more conservative. I mean, this is not a shopping center where there's going to be people coming in every 15 minutes, changing spots. This is employees coming and going, maybe they go for lunch and come back. It's a pretty low, I would think, a pretty low turnover type situation, and the 24, again, is standard.
And this is supported by the RSIS manual as well as the Urban Land Institute, 24-foot spaces, aisles. So in my opinion, I see no problem with the utilization of that width.
And not even an issue about safety. This is a fine aisle width, correct?
Right.
Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
very much. Mr. Vonnier is available for questions from the board.
Any questions?
Are you utilizing hairpin striping or just straight striping?
As I see, I think it's going to be straight striping. If there was a detail, I would know about in the site plan for hairpin striping. I don't know, might there be one
Well,
here?
quick answer from Mike.
Straight. As I understand, it's going to be straight striping, no double line hairpin.
Really tight, I think 9 by 18 by 24 with straight striping is extremely tight for this application. We're going to have a lot of older people visiting relatives. Not saying that they're better or worse drivers, but to me it seems tight, especially in that lower lot. The upper lot, there's more room to back into not another space. And I think your other parking lot looks like it complies with the ordinance, the existing.
This one, I think they are slightly wider, yes. I understand it.
So if the applicant can look at expanding that lower lot, I mean, you can look at putting the bus parking someplace else.
Yeah, the vans were going to be here, right in
And
this
then the
corner.
aisle there is 25.41.
And
you
also
can
here, they were going to be
pick up
idle in this area.
1.41 feet there.
You mentioned before about the hairpin striping.
Right.
Would an attempt to do that, would that be all right, maybe Mike can go with it.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in about the hairpin. So, hairpin striping, it may be a little bit deceptive in terms of what it's actually doing. It's not actually making the width of the space wider, so to speak. Okay. So in other words, like the space, the distance between spaces is still 9 feet. It's just that you have an offset, if you will, to accommodate the hairpin that goes around. So if you can think of a traditional parking space line, like a white line that's drawn there, you offset it a half of a foot in each direction, and then the hairpin kind of comes around it. It's still 9 feet. It's still 9 foot wide,
It
though.
provides a bigger target.
Right. And we could certainly accommodate, I think, hairpin should that be required, but the space itself is still going to be 9 foot wide. But we could certainly accommodate it.
Our comments to our engineer, I would just like to express my concern about that one lower lot, and to see if the applicant can pick up some space by shifting some things around in that area. Have a lot of dings, potential damaged vehicles there.
Can you be more specific of the area that you're referring to? You're just referring to
The
this?
southernmost lot, yes.
This area, so you're just concerned about the spacing of the,
The aisle widths, if you could increase the aisle width, then the 9 by 18 would be a little, there would be more room. I'm not suggesting you decrease the number of spaces, but just,
I mean, we could certainly take a look at it, and
What would, can I ask, as a follow-up, what would be the suggestion? How can we not lose spaces? Are you saying if you want a wider parking stall, I don't know how you do it without
a
losing
wider
space.
drive aisle, you could relocate
drive aisle.
that van parking area someplace else and shift those spaces, yes, northwestward. Yeah, I'm not going to engineer your plan for you, but it looks like there is some potential to pick up some space there.
So, Mike, what's your opinion?
well, so I could offer my opinion here. So every site plan that we design has constraints to it, as you guys can imagine. We have environmental constraints, we have setbacks lines, which have to do with the building size, and we also have aisle width constraints, we have parking constraints. Parking ordinance requirement for a typical parking space is 9 by 18 feet. For a typical handicap space, it is 8 foot wide by 20 foot long. That's the typical, okay? Handicap spaces, the reason why it's a little bit narrower is because they have what's called a striped area, which is either to the left or to the right of it. That striped area can be 5 foot, or it can be wider at 8 foot if it's a van accessible space. So that accommodates for, I'll call it the conditions that may be more adverse. But typical parking spaces, not just in Franklin, but clear across many of the municipalities across New Jersey and much of the United States, the standard size space is 9 by 18 foot. Hairpin striping definitely could be accommodated on the site rather than using the typical striping to provide that extra cushion, if you will, or perception of cushion that would keep vehicles from, quote unquote, digging one another. But that would be, but the layout that we have here right now, by adding those 2 extra feet, for instance, making it 26 foot wide instead of 24 foot wide, you're not going to be able to accommodate these various elements in here the way it's laid out right now. And yes, we would likely lose parking spaces as a result of it.
How many would you lose?
It depends. We would have to look at that scenario and lay it out.
Wouldn't be that much, though, right?
Again, it depends. I'd have to lay it out, and I can't give a straight answer without looking at it a little bit more in depth.
Why don't you take a look at that?
Well, Charlie, is the concern about cars getting dinged the aisle width or the parking space width?
I think when in the towns I've worked in, you can have a 24-foot aisle width, and then oftentimes there's the requirement for a deeper space and a wider space. So it's not all 3 together being the minimum dimension possible. So I am suggesting that if you have a narrow parking space, the ordinance is 26 feet. We're questioning it and asking why. That's the ordinance in the town. So I'm just coming up with ways to accomplish that, and I think that having wider than 24 feet in this situation, in this application, could be beneficial.
If I could offer my opinion as to why in the township the aisle width is 26 rather than 24, I think it really specific. I live in Franklin Township, so I live in a community that actually has the 26-foot wide. It's a residential community, a condo association. Specifically within that community, the reason why it's wider than the 24-foot wide, it specifically has to do with the fire access to the site, and having a slightly wider aisle width can accommodate or at least allow a fire truck to park itself and allow other vehicles to pass by it. In this particular case, we have analyzed that through this site with a fire vehicle. traversing through the site, both up and down, with regard to our templates as what was mentioned before. And it does pass through the site. We could certainly provide exhibits to the planning board engineer for him to review and concur with that conclusion. We have no problem doing that. But with regard to the safety and circulation through the site to accommodate that vehicle, the site is designed to accommodate that.
So can you reevaluate that with her thought in mind? And she said relocate, what'd you say, relocate those vans? Or?
I just suggested, can there be another spot for the van parking area? And you can pick up some space there.
But by van, do you mean a bus, the bus?
Whatever that says.
Space, yeah. Right,
Yes,
okay.
that.
We're talking about a very difficult trapped-in area, that triangle up at the north end. It's hard to do engineering on the fly right now in front of you, of course.
Right,
but,
I mean,
well,
you're
that's why we're
asking me
saying
to engineer this thing.
Take a look
No,
at
no,
it.
I'm not asking you to engineer it. I'm trying to picture what possibilities we have so we can throw a few more spaces in so that we can squeeze somewhere else. Like Mr. Thomas had said, I think if we do implement the 26-foot aisle, I think we're going to have some loss in spaces, regardless of what we do to that upper triangle.
We have some loss of spaces.
Yeah, I mean, no, I know you don't know, but I mean, it's not 10, it may not be 2, but it's probably not going to be 10 or 15. In other words, nothing that significant.
Well, I think it's hard to tell at this point. There might be another way to handle it, and that is send us as a condition to your town engineer and see if there is a way to do this without losing more than way that the engineers can work do it, because I think it is difficult. There's concern raised, we want to respond to it. But the real truth is engineers to figure that out.
Yeah, well, so
That would be a way to handle it.
let them do that.
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock. This is the time that we usually fold up our tent and go home. So maybe what we can do is we can adjourn this hearing, the next meeting that it's available. Then they can talk to the engineers in the meantime and come back and address this issue.
I just have a general question. Is it just this area that is of the concern? Is it this area right here? So I think we could do that. I think we could certainly work with the engineer to come up with I'll call it a solution to try to accommodate the 26-foot wide aisle width within this area. I think we probably could do it by possibly narrowing down this area even further than it is right now. It's about 2 foot wide. And also possibly narrowing down this area over here, which is also about 2 foot wide. So it may include the elimination of these 2 landscaped areas, which are kind of to the north and to the south. But I think we probably could accommodate that if that works on your end.
We'll see what you come up with. It's just a suggestion. I mean, those narrow strips, you'd probably have vehicle overhang anyway, so I'm not sure what kind of plants you could even put in those areas. So, yeah, if you look at those areas, the bus parking, it's a good start.
Yeah.
So, but to try and have some finality, we're 10 minutes away from being done, I think. I think we could live with a condition where you say, go to our engineers, and if you can find a way to increase the aisle width, at least in portions of that aisle, without losing too many space, and maybe set a number like 4 or 5, we can live with that. I mean, we're happy to try and work it out with the town engineer.
Can we word a condition like that, our attorney?
I can certainly word a condition like that as long as the board's comfortable with that. And I think what Mr. Smith has suggested is have the engineers confer, and if they can provide for an aisle width of 26 feet without losing more than 5 spaces, they will agree to do that. If they lose more than 5 spaces, they would have to come back to the board.
Or at least more than 24 feet.
Say that again? I'm
At
sorry, I
least
didn't,
closer to 26 feet. I don't know that you have to aim for
For
26
exactly
feet.
26.
Just
It
something
was
greater than 24.
somewhat wider than 24, that would be satisfactory.
Yeah, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
we're necessarily concerned about the loss of spaces because they're actually over. So it's not
Right.
like they're creating a
But
variance
we
or
are,
anything.
we are sorely in need of parking.
So,
as we
you know, if they end
testified.
up losing 6 spaces, it's not really a concern, I don't think, to the board. They're the ones who need the parking. They're over on parking, so they're not creating a variance that you need to be concerned.
You're pointing that out intellectually.
What I'm saying is typically, when you have to go back to the board, if you're gonna lose spaces or something like that, it's because that loss would create a variance that this board would have to deal with. If you lose 6 spaces, it's not gonna create a variance because you're well over your parking requirements. So it's really not a concern to this board if you lose 6 or 7 spaces. They're more concerned about the design of the parking lot.
Right.
So I'm giving you more flexibility.
Right, and I'm
You
trying to.
gotta explain that.
Yeah, I'm trying to process it. So your suggestion is allow this mediation process between the two engineers, try to come up with a wider road width than 24, and
And not have anything about if there's a loss, not worry about whether there's 4 or 5 spaces lost. Just
Yeah, we're
work it
not
out with the
worried
engineer.
about it.
I would say
They
you
lose, it's in your court.
parking spaces as you are comfortable with. Give us,
and if we're not comfortable, then we come back.
well,
I got it.
your facility's gonna work with 5 or 6 less space.
From your lips to God's ears. But I tell you what, if you can give us a couple of minutes, we can finish this.
One other thing.
Yes, sir.
If you could delineate the one-way on that drop-off area, I think that's important.
They do. On one of the other plans, they have pavement markings and signage that delineate that one way.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on this?
So, two very quick ones. Our architect, Steve Leone, please, if you would swear him in, we'll do this in 5 minutes or less.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please.
Stephen Leone, Leone, address is 229 Stonehurst Boulevard, Freehold, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Mr. Leone, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Spiesel Architectural Group, I'm principal with the firm.
And your credentials, shortest version possible?
Licensed in the state of New Jersey.
Move
Good.
on.
What will the building look like?
Okay. I will pull up board with colored renderings and also refer to the site plan in terms of context of where proposed additions are requested.
Was this part of the submission package to the
The
board?
colored renderings were not, so.
Okay, so
Let's
we'll have
mark
to mark
them.
those. A3 is next.
A3, and tonight's date.
And A3 is noted as front entrance elevation. If I may, I'd just like to start with the site plan that was previously presented by our engineer, just in terms of context and location of additions. So the primary addition, the larger footprint, 25,000 square foot newer building, 3 stories, is located in this L configuration, which is actually in the front of the building. So in essence, it creates a new front door for the facility. There's also a small addition to the southwest corner that is a small dining addition that is an appendage to the existing, what we call the legacy building, and in reference to work that may proceed in the existing building. There will be extensive renovation in the existing building to bring it closer to a standard that we will be providing in the new building. There's also a small addition requested in the northwest corner, and that will facilitate a vestibule entry that will support the proposed rear parking. So that's the context here. But the larger addition is in the front in that L-shaped configuration. Again, 3 stories predominantly. The front entrance elevation, as you see here depicted, is just that. It's a close-up view of the main entrance to the building, which happens in the middle knuckle of the L-shaped configuration. The building aesthetics can best be described as current design concepts with regard to what use occurs behind the walls, and that is predominantly a residential structure augmented with support amenities, in this particular case adult daycare and rehabilitation gym. Predominantly the materials are a mix of brick, which is an extension of the existing brick located on site, mixed with horizontal siding, use of stone in key areas as a water table around the entire facility, but also to mark the main entrance, and some use of metal and glass in those areas that depict uses behind it that are non-residential in particular. I think we've taken every effort to try and manage the facades, to try to scale the facades down. That's why you see a mix of materials. We think that we've blended those materials, and they are all earthen materials, earth tone materials, to a degree that creates the facades as being not as imposing. And that was the intent from Parker's perspective as well. If I may flip to the next exhibit, which I'll mark as A4. And that drawing is labeled nighttime view, which is essentially the same view, only with an evening perspective. And you can see we take, with the technology we have available to us, we take every liberty to look at the building in various times of day, various seasons as well. And you can see that the building will have a very light touch, it'll have a very warm feeling, again, with the use of the stone and brick and the horizontal siding, somewhat very typical residential materials. The building will also have a main canopy that again, marks its primary entrance. That canopy, as you can see, is articulated with stone and a glass ceiling. There will also be a canopy that runs along the entire length of what will be a drop-off area or the curbed area alongside the building to allow for occupants and passengers to be sheltered from weather. I will proceed with additional renderings. This is, yes, this will be marked as A5, right.
Can you just point out on the site plan where that view is from?
Sure. So A5 is a view of, again, the main facade of the new building, and it is just further back. So if this particular view would be as if you were standing at the far extreme edge of the parking, the new proposed parking area. And you can see that both wings obviously articulated in similar fashion so that there's a cohesiveness to it. But again, we've taken every effort to try and articulate those facades so that they aren't as imposing. You see an eyebrow line here as well to try and bring the scale of the building and the height of the building to be perceived as being lower. And again, these are things that we're doing to not only assist the board in trying to understand the scale of the building, but also because it's Parker's intention to try and scale the building down as much as possible.
Good. There is such a thing as too many views.
Okay.
So if you would mark that as the last one, and then if the board has questions, because I know they like to get us finished here tonight.
A6 is front entrance perspective.
Why don't you just if you have more, why don't you just quickly scroll through them, since the picture tells 1,000 words. Do you have more?
Okay.
Why don't you just scroll through, just explain what it is, just to finish it up.
So front entrance perspective, again, this is our drop-off approach to the main entrance. You can see the canopy on the right-hand side, and this would be an area where passengers would drop off. And we'll scroll through these quickly. Side perspective. What are we up to? 7.
And where's that view from?
This view would be, we've now entered off Delwood, and we are approximately just past the tree line and now nearly adjacent to the building.
So this is, you're on the site and you're coming up the entrance drive on the site.
That is correct.
Okay.
And even more detailed is we've driven about another 20 or 30 feet, and this is a direct line shot of this end of the building here. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Is there
Those are photos.
is there a full basement?
There is a basement, a partial basement, actually, and it's good that you asked that question right where we're on this rendering. The basement occurs right in this area. The footprint of the basement is approximately 3,900 square feet. It is strictly used for storage. That answers, I believe, one of the planning questions.
So it's just partial as you're picking up the grade.
Yeah, the grade really drops off here, and it actually, one way or the other, we would be required to build that much building envelope per se, and it actually amounts to being able to fit in a door and use that area for miscellaneous storage.
Okay, what are the ceiling heights on the other 3 floors?
14 feet floor to floor, first floor, and then it's 13.6 and 13.6.
And that's how you get the 48?
Well, that's a good question. So our engineers did a calculation with regard to the calculation of the height, and that calculation by ordinance is from the average grade along the front of the building, which would be this edge, and that math turns...
So you pick up the height because of the grade?
That's correct.
All right.
You mean it gets taller? I'm sorry. You mean it gets taller because of the grade?
The grade drops, yes. That's semantics. The grade drops off. The building doesn't necessarily get taller, except that you have what would be another story. But the basement is only a partial basement, so
You have anything to show that?
it comes back to, you can see how the grade comes up on this elevation, so it comes to about this area. Yeah. So the 48-foot height also includes what we're proposing to be roof screen that conceals the rooftop equipment.
So all the HVAC is roof mounted?
Not all of it, but most of it is.
Okay.
Being that these are residential rooms here, bedrooms, a lot of that is localized, but we do have need to have some rooftop equipment.
You mean with like wall-mounted electric air conditioning units?
It's not electric, but it's similar to that,
Okay.
along those same lines,
Each unit can control their own temperature?
to a degree.
Okay.
Is there anything else you need to put on the record?
For the sake of expediency, no, unless there are any questions.
Right.
Questions?
Well, I guess my question is, what is the height limit on a building like this in this particular zone?
In the zone, your requirement is 35 feet from average grade. That's what the zone requirement calls for, so that's what we're asking a variance for.
And what you've done to try and make it look not quite as tall is to change the type of building materials for that third floor?
Well, across the entire facade, so you're correct, but you can see that we've used a mix of brick and siding and the stone, sort of at each interval trying to cut that height down, and then the eyebrow then almost makes that upper floor appear to feel more like an attic than an actual full story. And again, that's perception. We know that the building height is what it is, but we're trying to, with every tool that we have architecturally, manage that scale.
How close are the nearest houses in this to this building? Like residences that are not part of the facility?
So I believe those would be along Darlington Boulevard,
Yep.
and we can
Across
to
the
the
street.
existing. So it's over 200 feet across in this. To the new work that we're proposing, the three-story building, it's well over 300 feet.
And the existing building is what's the height of the existing building?
That's a good question. Have that in here.
Well, how many floors is it?
It's 2 stories. So it's, what's 10 feet floor to floor, right? So it's about 22 feet, 24 feet.
Yeah.
The front has, there are areas in the front that raise up a little bit higher. I will say this, though, that the existing building is predominantly an unarticulated brick facade. Obviously, there are windows at the bedroom locations, but it's largely blank brick facades.
Anything else?
Last one, 10 minutes, we're done. Case will be done.
Keep saying.
Well, the last one's the planner. That's how you know it's the end. Planner's the end. He's the absolute end of the line. And he lives by the admonition of Shakespeare. Brevity is the soul of wit. I'd ask that Mr. Truscott be sworn so that he can give testimony.
Swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth.
I do.
Your name and address, please.
Martin P. Truscott, Truscott.
Mr. Truscott, for the record, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
By T&M Associates as a supervising planner.
Okay, and quick rundown of your credentials.
Thank you very much for staying. Yeah, I'm a licensed professional planner for over 30 years, member of the American Institute of Certified Planners.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, let me make it as straightforward and as quick as possible. Would you give us the municipal land use law justification for the granting of the 2 use variances requested, namely the expansion of the non-conforming elder care use, and secondly, the height variance that's requested? And then we have requested 2 bulks, the aisle width and the impervious coverage. And I don't think I've heard that the recharge is a variance. I think that's a waiver.
Yeah, that's not
Okay.
not a variance.
All right, so if you would.
I'd be particularly interested in hearing what you have to say about the height issue, because it seems you're in a residential area, and you've got a building that's a lot higher than everything else that's around.
Yes, I can address that. Yeah, okay, thank you. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of my planning testimony. This is an inherently beneficial use, and you've heard that already this evening with a prior application, and that's the type of use that's universally valued for its addressing public interest. And nursing homes are well known for, as in the courts, as being an inherently beneficial use. For the planning testimony, the proofs that have to be given, and it's pointed out by your planner's report, there's a four-part test that's made through the SEEK analysis, and I'll quickly go through that. The first is to identify the public interest at stake. In that case, we're talking about a skilled nursing long-term care facility, and it's serving the housing and senior population in a medically supportive environment. There's language in your master plan reexamination report of 2016 addressing the demographic trends of senior population, addressing emergency services, public transportation. It also recommends that the ordinance address increasing, because of the increased demand in housing, and specialized housing towards aged seniors, that residential health care and long-term care, that the township would review its zoning and accommodate for such uses in certain zones. So that's the first part. The second part is to identify the detrimental effects of the proposed use. In this case, we're talking about really a continuation of the existing approved inherently beneficial use. It was granted by use variance in 1984, so you're really expanding and intensifying that use. So it's really a continuation of what's already been granted by the town. So in terms of the detrimental effect, in my opinion, there's very little detrimental effect of this use. It's, as we said, where other variances, and we're going to address the D6 height variance. You've already have concerns about parking, and there's satisfactory parking, and the owner has provided and wants to provide more than enough parking, more than what your ordinance requires. All the site improvements are being proposed in terms of addressing stormwater management and other landscaping. So in my opinion, there's always effect of new construction and new development, but in my opinion, it's minimal detrimental effects, if anything. The third part is to address imposing reasonable conditions. And I think the board's addressed certain conditions and concerns about looking at parking, looking at the aisle widths, and those types of things. So it's my opinion, and well, before I go there, the last part of that SEEK analysis is to weigh the benefits of the use, the nursing home, the benefits to the senior population in this medical care, and to weigh the benefits versus any detriments. And in my opinion, the benefits of this use, the expansion of this use, farly outweigh any kind of detriment that may occur as part of the new construction. So that's the first part. That's the D2 variance. The second part is the D6, which is the height variance, and as is pointed out, the ordinance allows in the R20 zone a 2.5-story building with maximum 35 feet. In this case, we've noticed for a 48-foot height, but through my calculations, in accordance with what your ordinance, the way your ordinance defines height to the roof level, my calculations indicate it's only about 44.2 feet, and so it's not quite as much as noticed.
By the way, one thing that
Mr. Smith, just use the mic, please.
I'm sorry. Isn't there a 4-story residential development next to this?
Yes, there is. This Somerset, Avalon Somerset.
Any idea how tall that is?
No, I don't know exactly.
But it is taller.
It's definitely 4 stories, and there's a peaked roof, so it appears even higher than that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
so-
you.
Yeah.
Well, now, wait a minute. Where is this building?
Right next door.
Yeah, next door,
A little bit further down.
to the north,
Housing
of that.
right behind.
Along Darlington Boulevard, if you continue on Darlington Boulevard, there's the apartment complex. So that's right there, and it's a fairly new development. So this has a non-conforming use permitted by use variance, hasn't really affected, the new development in the area. So, so that my measurements are, in terms of the height, are along the front of the building, and so that's I believe that I've met with the definition that's required. In terms of the D6 variance and the height, then you have to address the positive and negative criteria. In terms of the positive criteria, this is inherently beneficial use, and so that presumptively satisfies the positive criteria. So, and I would also add on to that because of the existing setbacks of this, of the way the layout and location of the addition, it's set back 300 feet more than 300 feet from the front, 300 feet from the residential properties on the side, on the west side. So it provides adequate, and it meets the purpose of municipal land use law in providing adequate air, light, and open space. And I also feel that it also meets purpose E of the municipal land use law in terms of which addresses population density and concentration and concentrations of population in terms of meeting their well-being. That in terms of this is an adequate, sufficient, appropriate development because the number of beds are not increasing. It's providing more space to address the senior population. So that's the positive criteria. The negative criteria, there is the increase in height, and that also helps to reduce any kind of building coverage. I think that the relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance for the following reasons. The increased height will not have an adverse effect on air, light, and open space. As I've mentioned, because of the generous setbacks that are existing, it's going to, and the site, in terms of height, one of the many proofs that to satisfy a height variance is, can the site adequately accommodate the increase in height? In this case, we're not increasing the number of beds of the development, and so the applicant has addressed parking, stormwater management, and other requirements. So in my mind, the site can accommodate the increase in height. The increase, the additional floor area, as I mentioned, does not increase the number of beds, and it only adds facilities and enhances. And I think that was mentioned at the very beginning of this whole application. And the height is also screened by the mature woods in the front of the site, which right now you can see the building as you go along Delwood, but it's going to be a pretty good buffer. It is a pretty good buffer to that site. So it's set back, as I said, 300 feet from the front. So that takes care of the D6 variance. Moving on to the C variances, the first one is the maximum impervious coverage. As has been mentioned, in the R20 zone, you're allowed to have up to 25% of impervious coverage. The applicant's proposing 38.2, and right now it's 31%. In comparison, some of your commercial zones allow much more impervious coverage. In the GB zone, allows 70%. Your NB zone allows up to 80% coverage. Those sites are commercial in nature. This is almost a semi-commercial. It's residential in nature, but it's also very commercial in terms of large parking fields to address the population, facilities, employees. So there's the benefit of the additional coverage is provide the sufficient off-street parking and the building addition. And that parking addresses employees and guests and makes sure that there's no off-site impacts. The stormwater management runoff of the increased coverage is being addressed through the drainage facilities, as the engineer has already testified. So for those reasons, I think the coverage, the increased coverage, is not a substantial detriment to the public good, and the relief can be granted without such substantial detriment to the zone plan and zoning ordinance. Moving to the aisle width, which is also another C variance. Excuse me a second. In my mind, the board can grant relief because it addresses the purposes of the municipal land use law, which purpose M, which is to encourage coordination of the various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with a view of lessening the cost of such development and more efficient use of the land. So the reduced aisle width will decrease the pavement area, and still allow the adequate parking, as through the testimony of the two engineers. The traffic engineer has indicated that there's no decrease in safety of the decreased traffic, decreased aisle width. So for those reasons, I think that there's no substantial detriment to the public good by the decrease in the aisle width, and there's no substantial detriment to the zone plan ordinance, because this is an extension to an existing site, and it limits the additional pavement area. It's related to the additional pavement area and maintains the parking. So I think that just wraps up I'll conclude at that point.
Before I open up this up to questions, I just want to make like a cosmic point. And the cosmic point is this is your second inherently beneficial use that you're hearing tonight. In the last one, you had a couple of 1,000 square foot addition to a temple. You had the neighborhood out like crazy, very unhappy. We noticed 36 property owners within 200 feet of this site. And I'm looking around the room. The only person who is not part of our team, I think, is the gentleman from the local newspaper. I don't think he's an objector. Nobody came out to object. And they didn't come out to object because they love this facility. It's a great facility. And because it's such a big lot, there aren't impacts on them. The notice said we're asking for 48 feet. The notice said we're asking for the aisle width and the use variance and the whatever. The neighborhood is not at odds with this. This is a good use, unless you tell. Is there any negative impact on the master plan or zoning ordinance for this town?
No, I don't think so. The area's developed pretty nicely around, as this property's been in existence since, I think, the construction in 1987. It's developed around that area nicely, and so it's buffered, it has generous setbacks, so I don't see any detrimental impacts.
All right, our planner is open for questions.
Any questions? We'll go through the motions. Comment, ask a question. Close, anything you want to say?
Nothing is perfect in life, all right? The reason we have a zoning board is to make reasonable adjustments to your zoning. This was an R20 zone, all right? But in 1984, the town made a decision that having elder care at this location was good for the township. And you now have a situation where you're adding 77,000 square feet so you can provide adult daycare and have better services for the elderly who are at the facility now, while there's no increase in beds. You don't have a single resident, 36 of whom were noticed about tonight, about the height, about the 77,000 square feet. Nobody's here objecting to it, unlike the last inherently beneficial use, which was a couple thousand square feet. This is good for Franklin Township. It's good for the citizens of Franklin Township. You had your citizen here a little earlier, Joan Martin, who described what it means to her family and to the people of Franklin. This is a good proposal for the town. And yes, it's 48 feet high. The neighborhood doesn't care. They're not here. There's not a negative word being said about it. And yes, it's a significant expansion, but you get better services for the elderly in Franklin Township and surrounding areas. It's a good application. So we hope you'll approve it. And if you feel strongly that, I don't know how to say, is it Mrs. Bergallo? Miss Bergallo? Close enough? See, with a name like Smith, I never have that problem. But if you feel that you want us to try and mitigate the 26 aisle width by meeting with the town engineer, we're happy to try and do that. Hope you'll approve it.
Okay, board discussion or resolution?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to make this resolution go, because I think, Cheryl, we do want to put that in there, right?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
So, I think that,
I'm sure Jim can craft something.
Do you want to, Cheryl, you had made a comment about approaching 26. It doesn't have to get to 26. Is
Right.
there a number that you could live with?
I'm not going to name a number. I think they have to look at it. I think any effort to make them wider than 24 feet would be worthwhile.
I'll come up with something.
Oh, it's some combination of wider aisle, use of the hairpin striping, some combination of those to give a little more flexibility in the maneuverability in that parking lot.
Greater maneuverability.
Good. Those, I think, are the key words. I move that we grant Francis C. Parker Memorial Home, Inc. the use variances and bulk variances that it has requested for construction on 15 Delwood Lane, Somerset, New Jersey, to construct additional 75,000 square feet of space according to the plan presented tonight, and that we approve the site plan as displayed this evening, subject to the applicant meeting with the Township Engineering Department to review the parking in the parking configuration in the lower lot to increase the aisle size or take whatever action is necessary to improve the safety and maneuverability in that parking lot.
Second.
Raymond Betterbid,
Yes.
Alan Rich,
Yes.
Robert Shepherd.
Yes.
Anthony Caldwell,
Yes.
Gary Rosenthal,
Yes.
Cheryl Bugallo,
Yes.
and Chairman Thomas.
Yes. Thank the board, too. I thank all of you for your patience. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Move that we adjourn.
Meeting adjourned.